They called her a ghost, a scandal, a woman too poor to matter and too marked by tragedy to be touched. At the grandest wedding of the season, Eliza Rowan sat alone while society's elite whispered and laughed, watching her like vultures circling carrion. Her late husband's debts had stripped her of everything: her home, her reputation, her future. His cousin was closing in to take what little remained. She had no allies, no money, no hope. But when the most feared duke in England approached her with a proposal that would shock the entire ballroom, Eliza made a choice that would change everything. Stay until the end to see how a desperate widow becomes the woman no one can ignore. Don't forget to like this video and comment which city you're watching from. The crystal chandeliers of Ashworth Hall blazed like fallen stars, casting their merciless light across the faces of England's finest families. Champagne flowed in rivers of gold. Silk gowns rustled like autumn leaves as couples whirled across the polished marble floor. The wedding of Lord Pemberton's daughter was the event of the season, an extravaganza of wealth, power, and carefully orchestrated alliances. And in the corner, invisible to everyone who mattered, sat Eliza Rowan. She wore black, not the fashionable black of mourning silk trimmed with jet beads, but a plain, austere gown she'd worn to her husband's funeral 18 months ago. It was the only dress she owned that wasn't patched or faded. Her gloves were mended at the fingertips. Her jewelry, what little she hadn't sold, consisted of a simple gold locket containing a miniature portrait of parents she barely remembered. 26 years old, and she felt ancient. "Is that the Rowan widow?" A voice drifted from nearby, pitched just loud enough to ensure Eliza would hear. "I'm surprised she dared show her face." "Desperate, I imagine," another woman replied with a laugh like breaking glass. "I heard Thomas Rowan left her absolutely destitute. Gambling debts, failed investments, mortgages on properties that don't exist. The scandal nearly destroyed the Pemberton family. They're only distant cousins, thank heaven. And yet here she sits, bold as brass, eating their food and drinking their wine." Eliza's fingers tightened around her champagne glass. She didn't drink, couldn't afford to lose control even for a moment, but holding it gave her something to do with her hands, something that made her look less pathetic, less alone, less like the cautionary tale she'd become. The truth was worse than the whispers suggested. Thomas Rowan had been charming, educated, from a respectable family with old ties to minor nobility. When he'd courted Eliza, orphaned, isolated, living on the charity of an elderly aunt, she'd believed herself saved. He was handsome. He spoke of poetry and philosophy. He promised her a life of comfort and companionship. The marriage had lasted 3 years. 3 years of watching Thomas gamble away money they didn't have. 3 years of creditors appearing at the door with increasingly threatening letters. 3 years of discovering that the properties he'd claimed to own were mortgaged beyond redemption, that the investments he'd boasted about were fabrications, that the man she'd married was a beautiful lie wrapped in expensive tailoring. When he died, thrown from a horse while racing drunk with friends, Eliza had wept, not from grief, but from relief, and then from terror, when she realized the debts didn't die with him. Everything had been seized: the house in London, the furniture, her clothing, her books, her mother's jewelry. Creditors had picked through her life like crows on a battlefield, taking everything of value and leaving her with nothing but a battered trunk and a reputation in ruins. "Mrs. Rowan." Eliza looked up to find Lady Pemberton standing before her, resplendent in emerald silk and diamonds that could have fed a village for a year. Her smile was glacial. "How kind of you to attend," Lady Pemberton said, her tone making it clear it was anything but kind. "Though I must confess surprise. I wasn't aware you'd received an invitation." Eliza stood, keeping her spine straight despite the humiliation burning through her chest. "I received one, my lady, perhaps sent in error, given the distant connection between our families, but I thought it would be more discourteous to ignore it than to attend quietly." "Quietly?" Lady Pemberton's gaze swept over Eliza's plain gown, her mended gloves, the slight fraying at her hem. "Yes, I suppose you are being quiet. Though one wonders why you'd choose to torture yourself by attending an event where you so clearly don't belong." The words hit like a slap, but Eliza had learned to absorb such blows without flinching. "I wish to pay my respects on your daughter's happy day, my lady. Nothing more." How charitable. Lady Pemberton's smile sharpened. Though charity does seem to be your primary currency these days, doesn't it? Living on the generosity of others, attending events in hopes of what exactly? Finding another wealthy fool to marry? I hate to disappoint you, Mrs. Rowan, but most men prefer wives who bring dowries rather than debts. Heat flooded Eliza's face, but she kept her voice steady. I have no intention of seeking another husband, Lady Pemberton. I came only to remind us all of poor judgment and wasted potential. Lady Pemberton's eyes were merciless. You were educated, Mrs. Rowan. You could have been a governess, a companion to a respectable woman, even a teacher at a girls' school. Instead, you threw yourself at the first charming face who paid you attention, and now look at you. A cautionary tale we mothers use to warn our daughters against romantic folly. The ballroom had gone quiet around them. Conversations paused. Dancers slowed. Everyone was watching now, drinking in the public humiliation like fine wine. Eliza's throat tightened, but she refused to cry. She'd shed her last tears months ago when she'd sold her mother's wedding ring to pay for bread. There was nothing left inside her but a cold, hard determination to survive. I understand, Lady Pemberton, she said quietly. I'll take my leave. See that you do. Lady Pemberton's voice carried across the silent ballroom. And Mrs. Rowan, don't return. The Pembertons have extended all the charity we intend to offer. Any future correspondence between us will go through our solicitors regarding the house. Eliza's blood turned to ice. The house? The property in Ashford. Surely you remember it. The small estate your late husband claimed to own? Lady Pemberton's smile was poisonous. It turns out the mortgage was guaranteed by his cousin, William Rowan. Since you failed to make any payments, understandably given your circumstances, William has petitioned to take possession. As his family, we support his claim. The courts will finalize the transfer within a month. The room spun. The house in Ashford was all Eliza had left. It was small, isolated, barely more than a cottage with a handful of acres. But it was hers. The one thing the creditors hadn't been able to touch because of the complex legal entanglement of the mortgage. She'd been planning to go there, to live quietly and survive on whatever she could grow or make with her own hands. Without it, she had nothing. Nowhere to go. No future at all. That property is mine, Eliza said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. My husband left it to me in his will. William has no legal... William is family, Lady Pemberton interrupted. You are merely the embarrassing widow of a disgraceful nephew. The courts will see reason, I assure you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have guests who actually belong here to attend to. She swept away, leaving Eliza standing alone in the center of the ballroom, while hundreds of eyes watched with expressions ranging from pity to contempt to satisfaction. This was it, the final blow. In 1 month, she would lose even the illusion of security. She would be completely, utterly destitute. Eliza turned toward the exit, her vision blurring with unshed tears she refused to release. She would leave quietly, with whatever dignity she could salvage. She would walk out of this glittering hell and never, ever return. Mrs. Rowan? The voice cut through the silence like a blade, deep, cold, unmistakably aristocratic. Every head in the ballroom turned toward its source. Alexander Hawthorne, the Duke of Thornbury, stood 3 paces away. Eliza had never met him, but everyone knew who he was. 32 years old, unmarried, despite relentless pressure from every ambitious family in England. Master of one of the largest estates in the country, with wealth that made the Pembertons look like comfortable gentry. Devastatingly handsome in the cold, severe way of marble statues, dark hair, steel-gray eyes, a face that seemed carved from ice and shadows. And notoriously, legendarily cruel to anyone who wasted his time. Your Grace, Eliza whispered, dropping into a curtsy because it was the only thing she could think to do. Her mind raced. Had she offended him somehow? Sat in his seat? Accidentally insulted his family? He studied her with those merciless gray eyes, his expression unreadable. The entire ballroom held its breath. I find myself in need of a fiancé, he said, his voice carrying easily across the frozen crowd. Would you do me the honor of accepting my proposal? The silence shattered into chaos. Gasps erupted from every corner. Women clutched their fans. Men stared in disbelief. Lady Pemberton looked as though she'd been struck by lightning. Eliza stared at the Duke, her mind blank with shock. This had to be a cruel joke. Some elaborate humiliation designed to destroy what little remained of her reputation. The Duke of Thornbury proposing to her. Impossible. Insane. But his eyes held hers, steady and cold and absolutely serious. "I don't understand," Eliza managed, her voice barely audible. "Your Grace, I require a fiancé to discourage the relentless matchmaking that has made my life intolerable," Alexander said, as calmly as if he were discussing the weather. "You require protection from vultures circling your meager assets and social standing. A mutually beneficial arrangement, I believe. What say you, Mrs. Rowan? Will you accept?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that the Duke of Thornbury didn't make generous offers without expecting something in return, that accepting would entangle her in something far beyond her understanding. But what choice did she have? In 1 month, she would lose everything. She would be homeless, penniless, completely at the mercy of a world that had already shown her nothing but contempt. At least this, whatever this was, offered a chance. A sliver of hope in the darkness. Eliza lifted her chin and met the Duke's cold gray gaze. "Yes," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I accept." The Duke's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, approval, perhaps, or satisfaction. He extended his hand. Eliza placed her trembling fingers in his, and the ballroom erupted into pandemonium. The carriage ride to Hawthorne Manor took 4 hours through darkness and driving rain. Eliza sat across from the Duke, acutely aware of every breath, every creak of the carriage wheels, every flash of lightning that illuminated his severe profile. He hadn't spoken since they'd left Ashworth Hall, in a storm of shocked whispers and Lady Pemberton's furious protests. He'd simply escorted Eliza to his carriage, instructed his driver to take them home, and settled into ominous silence. Now, as the wheels clattered over rough country roads, Eliza's initial shock was giving way to creeping terror. What had she agreed to? She knew nothing about this man except his reputation. Cold, ruthless, intolerant of weakness or deception. Men whispered that he'd destroyed rivals with surgical precision. Women claimed he'd never shown genuine affection to anyone, and she'd just agreed to become his fiancée. "You're afraid," the Duke said suddenly, his voice cutting through the rain's percussion. Eliza started. No, Your Grace. I'm simply uncertain of what you expect from me." Honesty would be preferable to platitudes. He leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes catching the lamplight. "You're terrified. You've agreed to tie yourself to a man you don't know, based on nothing but desperation and a vague promise of protection. You're wondering if you've traded one disaster for something worse." The accuracy of his observation left her breathless. "Yes," she admitted, because he'd asked for honesty. "I'm afraid." "Good." He settled back against the leather seat. "Fear will keep you cautious. Caution will keep you from making foolish mistakes that would force me to dissolve this arrangement prematurely." "What exactly is this arrangement, Your Grace? You mentioned discouraging matchmaking, but for the past 3 years my mother and every ambitious family in England have made it their mission to see me married," Alexander interrupted, his tone sharp with irritation. "Every social event becomes a parade of eligible daughters. Every dinner, a negotiation. Every conversation, a thinly veiled matrimonial ambush. It's intolerable." "So you want them to believe you're already engaged," Eliza said slowly, beginning to understand. "To remove yourself from consideration." "Precisely. A temporary engagement to a woman of no particular social standing or beauty, no offense intended, will cause enough scandal to discourage further pursuit while avoiding the permanent entanglement of actual marriage." The casual cruelty of his words stung, but Eliza forced herself to focus on the logic beneath them. "And what do I receive in return?" "Protection from your late husband's cousin and his legal machinations. A place to live without fear of eviction. An allowance sufficient to maintain appropriate appearances. And when our engagement ends, as it inevitably will, a settlement generous enough to establish yourself independently." It was practical, businesslike, utterly devoid of sentiment or warmth, and it was more than anyone else had offered her. How long would this arrangement last? Eliza asked. 6 months? Perhaps a year? Long enough to convince society that I am genuinely committed, then a quiet dissolution based on irreconcilable differences. You'll emerge with your reputation intact and your financial future secure. I'll emerge free from harassment. And if I refuse now, if I change my mind, his eyes hardened, then I'll return you to Ashworth Hall immediately, and you may explain to Lady Pemberton and her guests why the Duke of Thornbury's proposal was insufficient for your standards. I imagine that will do wonders for your social standing. A trap, then. Elegantly constructed, but a trap nonetheless. Accepting meant surrendering control to a man who saw her as a convenient tool. Refusing meant destroying what little remained of her reputation while gaining nothing. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Rowan, Alexander continued, his voice softening slightly, though whether with honesty or calculation, Eliza couldn't tell. This will not be easy. My mother despises disruption. The families who expected their daughters to become duchess will hate you for stealing what they believe is rightfully theirs. Society will judge you harshly for reaching above your station. You'll face hostility, contempt, and likely several attempts to expose you as a fortune hunter, or worse. Then why choose me? Eliza asked, genuine confusion breaking through her fear. If you wanted to discourage matchmaking, why not select someone from a respectable family? Someone who wouldn't generate scandal? For the first time, something almost like a smile crossed his severe features. Because someone respectable would expect this to become real. They would harbor hopes of genuine affection, perhaps even love. They would be disappointed when I failed to provide it, and disappointment breeds resentment. You, Mrs. Rowan, have no such illusions. You're desperate enough to accept the arrangement as it stands, practical enough to understand its limitations, and clever enough, I hope, to play your role convincingly without demanding more than I'm willing to give. It was the most honest explanation anyone had offered her in years. Brutal, yes, but honest. Very well, Your Grace, Eliza said quietly. I accept your terms. 6 months to a year of pretending to be your fiancé, in exchange for protection and eventual financial security. I'll play whatever role you require. Excellent. He pulled a small box from his coat pocket and handed it to her. You'll need this. Eliza opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a ring, a sapphire the size of a robin's egg, surrounded by diamonds that caught the lamplight and scattered it into rainbow fragments. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. It was also a shackle. It belonged to my grandmother, Alexander said. Wear it always, let everyone see it, let them know you belong to me now. Eliza slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. The weight of it felt strange, heavy with implications she didn't fully understand. Thank you, Your Grace, she whispered. Alexander, he corrected. If we're to be engaged, you should use my given name, at least in private. Alexander. The name felt foreign on her tongue, too intimate for a man she'd known for less than 2 hours. And you should call me Eliza. Very well, Eliza. He leaned back again, his face disappearing into shadow. We'll arrive at Hawthorne Manor within the hour. My mother will be there along with several house guests. You'll be introduced as my fiancé. They will test you, probe for weakness, search for any excuse to dismiss you as unsuitable. Do not give them one. What should I say if they ask how we met, or why you chose me? Tell them we've known each other for some time through mutual acquaintances. That I was drawn to your intelligence and resilience in the face of adversity. That our engagement may surprise society, but those who know me best understand I've never cared for conventional expectations. Lies, then, Eliza said softly. Necessary fictions, Alexander corrected. There's a difference. Lies are meant to deceive. Fictions are meant to protect. Learn to distinguish between them, and you'll survive this arrangement. Fail to do so, and you'll be destroyed. The carriage crested a hill, and through the rain-streaked windows, Eliza saw Hawthorne Manor for the first time. It was enormous, a sprawling estate of gray stone and Gothic towers that seemed to rise from the earth like a fortress. Lights blazed in dozens of windows, casting golden pools across manicured gardens and ancient oak trees. The main building alone looked large enough to house 100 people, The wings stretched away into darkness, promising depths she couldn't begin to imagine. This was to be her home, her prison, her salvation. "Welcome to Hawthorne Manor," Alexander said, and for the first time Eliza detected something in his voice that might have been weariness, or perhaps warning. "Try not to let it eat you alive." The entrance hall was a cathedral of marble and gilt, rising 3 stories to a painted ceiling depicting gods and battles Eliza didn't recognize. A double staircase curved upward like swan's wings, and everywhere she looked there was wealth. Paintings in heavy gold frames, statues of Greek heroes, furniture that looked museum quality. And standing at the base of the stairs, surrounded by 7 of the most beautiful women Eliza had ever seen, was the Dowager Duchess of Thornbury. Catherine Hawthorne was perhaps 60, but age had only refined her beauty into something sharp and dangerous. Her silver hair was arranged in elaborate curls. Her gown was deep purple silk, worth more than Eliza's entire former life. Diamond earrings caught the chandelier light and threw it back in cold flashes. But it was her eyes, the same steel gray as her son's, that made Eliza's breath catch. They held no warmth, no welcome, only calculation and contempt. "Alexander," the Dowager Duchess said, her voice like silk over razors, "what is the meaning of this?" "Mother," Alexander removed his gloves with deliberate precision. "May I present my fiancée, Mrs. Eliza Rowan? Eliza, this is my mother, the Dowager Duchess Catherine Hawthorne." Eliza curtsied deeply, keeping her eyes lowered. "Your Grace, I'm honored to How dare you?" Catherine's voice cracked like a whip. The hall went silent. "How dare you bring this nobody into my home and claim her as your betrothed?" "I dare because it's my home, Mother, not yours." Alexander's voice remained calm, but Eliza heard steel beneath the words. "And my choice of wife is precisely that, my choice." "Wife?" One of the 7 women stepped forward, a blonde goddess in rose silk who looked at Eliza like something scraped off her shoe. "You can't be serious, Alexander. She's wearing a dress from 2 seasons ago. Her gloves are mended. She looks like a governess, not a duchess." "Lady Victoria," Alexander said coldly, "I don't recall asking your opinion." "But surely you can see this as madness," another woman interjected, dark-haired, elegant, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. "Lady Arabella Sinclair, Your Grace," she said to Eliza with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've known Alexander since childhood. We all have." She gestured to the other women. "We're here as his mother's guests, naturally concerned for his welfare, and frankly, we're all wondering the same thing. What could possibly have possessed him to choose you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. All 7 women watched Eliza with expressions ranging from confusion to fury to calculating interest. They were beautiful, educated, from impeccable families. Everything Eliza wasn't. "Perhaps," Eliza said carefully, "you should ask him." "Oh, we intend to," Lady Victoria said. "Privately, without witnesses." "Alexander, surely you can spare us a few moments to explain this situation?" "There's nothing to explain," Alexander said. "Eliza is my fiancée. That's all you need to know." "All we need to know?" Catherine's voice rose, genuine anger breaking through her controlled facade. "You disappear to a wedding, return hours later with a widow of no standing, no fortune, no family worth mentioning, and announce she's to be the next Duchess of Thornbury? And you expect us to simply accept this?" "Yes," Alexander said flatly. "Because it's done. Eliza wears my grandmother's ring. She has my protection and my name. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. I trust I'm making myself clear?" The silence that followed was electric with tension. Catherine's face had gone pale with rage. The 7 women looked between each other, their careful social mask slipping to reveal naked hostility. "Crystal clear," Catherine said finally, her voice tight. "Though I suspect this farce will end badly for everyone involved, especially her." She turned to Eliza. "Tell me, Mrs. Rowan, or should I say future Duchess, are you prepared for what awaits you? The scrutiny, the judgment, the absolute certainty that you don't belong and never will." Eliza met her gaze directly, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. "I'm prepared to learn, Your Grace. and to earn my place here through action rather than expectation. Earn your place? Catherine laughed, the sound like breaking ice. This isn't a position you earn, child. It's one you're born to, and you, very clearly, were not. Then I'll have to exceed expectations, Eliza said quietly. Won't I? For a moment, something flickered in Catherine's eyes, surprise perhaps, or the faintest hint of respect, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. We'll see, Catherine said. Mrs. Harding will show you to your rooms. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late. She swept up the staircase without another word, the 7 women trailing behind her like a cloud of perfumed resentment. Alexander watched them go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Eliza. That went better than expected, he said. Better? Eliza stared at him. Your mother looks ready to murder me in my sleep. She won't murder you, exile you, humiliate you, make your life a living hell, certainly, but murder would be too quick and too merciful for Mother's taste. He offered the ghost of a smile. Don't worry, she'll come to accept the situation eventually. She has no choice. And the others? Those 7 women? Disappointed suitors, or rather, women whose families hope to secure an alliance with the Hawthorne dukedom. Victoria Ashford, Arabella Sinclair, Charlotte Pemberton, Louisa Gray, Eleanor Blackwood, Cassandra Hartley, and Diana Wentworth, all from the finest families in England, all furious that you've stolen what they believe is rightfully theirs. Wonderful, Eliza said faintly. I feel so welcome. You're not here to be welcome. You're here to play a role. The Alexander's voice hardened. Remember that, and you'll survive. Forget it, and they'll destroy you. Before Eliza could respond, a thin, severe-looking woman in a housekeeper's black dress appeared from a side corridor. Mrs. Harding, Alexander said, please escort Mrs. Rowan to the blue suite. See that she has everything she needs. Of course, Your Grace. Mrs. Harding's expression was professionally neutral, but her eyes held the same skepticism Eliza had seen in everyone else. This way, Mrs. Rowan. Eliza followed her up the grand staircase, acutely aware of Alexander's gaze on her back. She didn't look at him again. Couldn't risk revealing the terror that was finally, fully settling into her bones now that the shock was wearing off. She'd agreed to this, chosen this. There was no going back now. The blue suite turned out to be larger than the entire cottage where Eliza had been planning to spend the rest of her life. A sitting room with silk-covered furniture. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in midnight velvet. A dressing room that could have housed a family of 4. Your trunks will arrive tomorrow, Mrs. Harding said crisply, though I understand you travel light. It wasn't a question, but Eliza heard the judgment beneath it. Yes, I have very little in the way of possessions. The Duke has arranged for a dressmaker to attend you tomorrow morning. You'll need an appropriate wardrobe if you're to appear in public as his fiancée. Mrs. Harding's gaze swept over Eliza's worn gown. The current situation is unsuitable. I understand. Dinner is at 8, as the Dowager Duchess mentioned. Dress appropriately. Don't be late. Mrs. Harding turned to leave, then paused. A word of advice, Mrs. Rowan. The women downstairs are not your friends. They will smile and speak kindly while searching for any weakness they can exploit. Trust no one. Reveal nothing. And whatever you do, don't fall in love with the Duke. Eliza blinked. I beg your pardon? He's my employer and I respect him, Mrs. Harding said. But he's also a man who's been hurt deeply and has vowed never to be hurt again. He doesn't love Mrs. Rowan. He doesn't trust. He uses people, sometimes kindly, sometimes not, but he always uses them. If you forget that, you'll end up destroyed. Remember it, and you might survive with your heart intact. She left before Eliza could respond, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. Eliza stood in the center of her beautiful new cage and finally allowed herself to cry. Eliza woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, and the terrifying realization that last night hadn't been a nightmare. She was actually here, in Hawthorne Manor, engaged to a duke who saw her as a convenient shield against matrimonial ambition, surrounded by women who wanted her gone, and a dowager duchess who looked at her like an insect to be crushed. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Mrs. Rowan. A young maid entered, carrying a silver tray. "I'm Annie, miss. His Grace instructed me to attend you. I've brought breakfast and—" She hesitated, her eyes wide with something between pity and fascination. "The dressmaker is waiting in the sitting room, Madame Levesque. She's brought half her shop, from what I can tell." Eliza sat up, pulling the blanket around herself. The nightgown she'd worn, her own, thin and patched, looked ridiculous against the silk sheets. "Thank you, Annie. I'll be ready shortly." The girl set down the tray and lingered, clearly wanting to say something but uncertain if she should. "What is it?" Eliza asked gently. Annie bit her lip. "It's just— the staff is talking, miss, about you and his Grace. Some say it's romantic, him choosing someone for love instead of position. Others say—" She trailed off, her cheeks flushing. "Others say I'm a fortune hunter who trapped him somehow," Eliza finished. "It's all right, Annie. I've heard worse." "I don't think that, miss," Annie said quickly. "I think anyone who can make the Duke smile, even just a little, must be special." The kindness in her voice made Eliza's throat tighten. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After Annie left, Eliza forced herself to eat, toast and tea she could barely taste, and steeled herself for what lay ahead. The dressmaker would be the first test. Then dinner tonight with Alexander's mother and those 7 beautiful vultures circling their wounded prey. She had to survive this. Had to prove she could play the role Alexander required without breaking. Madame Levesque turned out to be a tiny Frenchwoman with sharp eyes and sharper opinions. She circled Eliza like a general surveying a battlefield, making notes and occasional sounds of dismay. "Too thin," she muttered in heavily accented English. "The bones show. We must create the illusion of curves where nature has been neglectful. And the skin, so pale. You have been indoors too much, no? Or perhaps you do not eat properly." "Both," Eliza admitted. "I haven't had much reason to go out in society, or much to eat." Madame Levesque's expression softened slightly. "Ah, so you are the one they whisper about, the poor widow who caught the Duke's eye." She snapped her fingers at her assistants, who began unpacking trunks filled with fabrics in every color imaginable. "Well, we shall make you beautiful enough to silence the whispers, or at least make them whisper different things." For the next 3 hours, Eliza was measured, draped, pinned, and analyzed. Madame Levesque rejected dozens of fabrics before settling on a palette of deep jewel tones, sapphire, emerald, burgundy, that brought color to Eliza's pale complexion. "Nothing too virginal," the dressmaker announced. "You are a widow, after all. We use this to advantage. Sophisticated, elegant, with just enough—" She made a gesture that somehow conveyed both mystery and sensuality. "The other women will wear pastels like debutantes. You will wear the colors of a woman who knows herself." "I'm not sure I do know myself," Eliza said quietly. Madame Levesque paused, a measuring tape draped around her neck. "Then you will learn. The Duke, he does not choose fools. If he brought you here, you have something they do not. Find it, use it, survive." The same advice Mrs. Harding had given her. Survive. As if this beautiful prison were a battlefield where only the clever and ruthless lived to see another day. By the time Madame Levesque left, promising to return with completed gowns within days, Eliza was exhausted, but there was no time to rest. A note had been delivered during the fitting, written in severe black ink on heavy cream paper. "Join me in the library at 2 o'clock. We have matters to discuss." A. The library turned out to be a cathedral of books, shelves rising 2 stories high, leather-bound volumes in every language, reading nooks with cushioned chairs positioned near tall windows. The smell of old paper and ink wrapped around Eliza like a familiar embrace. For the first time since arriving, she felt something close to peace. Alexander stood near one of the windows, silhouetted against the afternoon light. He didn't turn when she entered. "My father built this library," he said. "Spent 40 years collecting first editions, rare manuscripts, books most people have never heard of. He died in this room, reading Plutarch. Mother found him slumped in that chair." He gestured to a wing-back chair near the fireplace. "She had it reupholstered. Couldn't bear to look at it otherwise." "I'm sorry," Eliza said, unsure what else to offer. "Don't be. He was a difficult man. Brilliant, demanding, impossible to please. Alexander finally turned to face her. Rather like his son, I imagine people say. He looked different in daylight, less like a marble statue and more like a man carrying weight he couldn't set down. The severe lines of his face seemed drawn by exhaustion rather than cruelty. His eyes, those cold gray eyes, held shadows she hadn't noticed before. I wanted to discuss the arrangement, he continued, moving to a desk where papers lay scattered. There will be a formal announcement in the newspapers within the week. My solicitors are already drafting the betrothal contract. Your late husband's debts will be settled in full. The property in Ashford will be secured in your name with no legal claim from William Rowan or anyone else. You'll receive an allowance of £200 per quarter for personal expenses. Eliza's breath caught. £200 per quarter was more money than she'd seen in her entire marriage to Thomas. That's extraordinarily generous, Alexander. It's necessary. You can't appear as my fiancé wearing mended gloves and outdated gowns. Society judges ruthlessly, and they'll judge you most of all. Every detail of your appearance, your speech, your behavior will be scrutinized. He paused, his gaze sharp. Which brings me to the difficult part. We need to establish rules. Rules? Boundaries. Expectations. He picked up one of the papers, a list written in his precise handwriting. First, public displays. Will need to appear convincingly attached when observed by others. I'll escort you to dinner, balls, social events. We'll dance together, sit near each other, engage in conversation that suggests intimacy. You'll wear my grandmother's ring always. In private, however, we maintain appropriate distance. Separate bedrooms, separate lives. Is this acceptable? Yes, Eliza said, though the clinical nature of his terms made her heart ache in ways she couldn't quite name. Second, my mother and her guests will test you constantly. They'll ask intrusive questions, make cutting remarks disguised as concern. Search for any inconsistency in your story. You must never waver. We met through mutual acquaintances 6 months ago. We've been corresponding in private, keeping our attachment quiet, until we were certain of our feelings. The engagement is sudden only because we saw no reason to delay once we'd decided. 6 months, Eliza repeated, committing it to memory. Mutual acquaintances. Private correspondence. Third, and most important, this arrangement ends when I determine it served its purpose. It could be 6 months, it could be a year. When that time comes, we'll stage a quiet dissolution based on incompatible expectations regarding the future. You'll receive your settlement and your freedom. I'll receive mine. No recriminations, no dramatics, no attempts to prolong what was always meant to be temporary. Each word felt like a small cut. Eliza told herself it shouldn't hurt. She'd known from the beginning this was business, not romance. But hearing him lay it out so coldly, reducing their engagement to a series of transactional rules, made her feel more alone than she'd felt sitting in that corner at the Ashworth Hall ball. I understand, she said quietly. Is there anything else? Alexander studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Softened, almost. Yes. One more thing. While you're here, you have full access to this library. Read whatever you like. I suspect you'll need the escape. The unexpected kindness broke through her careful composure. Thank you, she whispered. I love books. They were the only friends I had during my marriage. Then consider this your sanctuary. He moved toward the door, then paused. Eliza, what happened earlier with my mother? It will get worse before it gets better. She's not cruel by nature, but she's protective of the family legacy and deeply skeptical of anyone she perceives as opportunistic. Prove you're not here to exploit me, and she may eventually accept you. But until then, I'll face a war, Eliza finished. Precisely. He opened the door. Dinner is at 8. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. You'll need every advantage you can claim. After he left, Eliza sank into one of the reading chairs, not the one where Alexander's father had died, but a smaller one near the window, and let the silence wrap around her. She'd survived the first day. Barely. Tonight would bring new challenges, new tests, new opportunities to fail. But she had this library, this sanctuary, these thousands of books that didn't judge or whisper or calculate her worth based on her dress or her dowry. It would have to be enough. The dress Madame Levesque had left for dinner was deep sapphire silk that brought out the blue in Eliza's eyes and made her pale skin look luminous rather than sickly. Annie had arranged her hair in a sophisticated style, not the elaborate curls the other women would wear, but a simpler elegance that suggested confidence rather than desperate striving. "You look beautiful, miss," Annie whispered as she fastened a simple pearl necklace, another loan from Alexander's collection, around Eliza's throat. "They won't know what to think." "That's rather the point," Eliza said, though her hands trembled as she smoothed the silk skirt. The sapphire ring caught the lamplight, throwing blue fire across the walls. A brand, a claim, a lie made visible. The dining room was a cavern of polished mahogany and crystal. A table that could seat 30 stretched beneath 3 massive chandeliers. Catherine sat at the head, resplendent in black silk that made her look like a queen in mourning. Alexander sat to her right. The 7 women occupied the other seats like pieces on a chessboard, their gowns a rainbow of pastels exactly as Madame Levesque had predicted. Every head turned when Eliza entered. Every conversation stopped. "Mrs. Rowan," Catherine said, her voice carrying the chill of deep winter. "How striking you look. Do sit down. You're keeping us waiting." The only empty chair was at the foot of the table, as far from Alexander as possible, positioned directly across from Lady Victoria Ashford. A deliberate insult, placing the supposed fiancé at the lowest position of honor. Eliza sat without comment, meeting Catherine's gaze with what she hoped looked like serene confidence rather than terror. "I trust your accommodations are satisfactory?" Catherine continued as servants began bringing in the first course, a delicate consommé that smelled like heaven and made Eliza's empty stomach clench with hunger. "Very much so, Your Grace. The blue suite is beautiful." "It's where we usually house visiting governesses and ladies' companions," Lady Arabella Sinclair said sweetly. "Not quite the Duchess's apartments, but suitable for temporary guests." "I'm perfectly comfortable," Eliza said evenly, refusing to take the bait. "Of course you are." Lady Charlotte Pemberton, yes, related to Lady Pemberton from the ball, smiled with poisonous sympathy. "Coming from your circumstances, I imagine any room with a roof must seem luxurious." Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. "I've learned to appreciate simple comforts, yes, perhaps more than those who've never known their absence." A flicker of surprise crossed Charlotte's face. She'd expected Eliza to crumble or lash out, not respond with quiet dignity. "Tell us, Mrs. Rowan." Lady Eleanor Blackwood leaned forward, her dark eyes calculating. "How exactly did you and Alexander meet? He's been quite mysterious about the whole affair." This was it, the first real test. Eliza glanced down the table at Alexander, who watched her with those unreadable gray eyes. "Through mutual acquaintances," Eliza said, repeating the story they'd rehearsed. "About 6 months ago. We discovered a shared love of literature and began corresponding." 6 months? Lady Louisa Gray's eyebrows rose. "And yet none of us heard even a whisper of this attachment. How remarkably discreet." "Alexander values his privacy," Eliza said, "as do I. We saw no reason to invite speculation or gossip until we were certain of our feelings." "How romantic," Lady Cassandra Hartley drawled. "A secret courtship, hidden from society, culminating in a dramatic public proposal. It's like something from a novel, a rather unbelievable novel." "Life often exceeds fiction in its improbabilities," Eliza replied. Catherine set down her spoon with a sharp click. "What my son's guests are attempting to ask, with varying degrees of subtlety, is whether you understand the magnitude of what you're undertaking. Being Duchess of Thornbury isn't a romantic fantasy. It's a position of immense responsibility, requiring education, refinement, and social connections you simply do not possess." "I'm aware of my deficiencies, Your Grace," Eliza said quietly. "I also believe people can learn, grow, and rise to meet challenges they never expected to face. Or they can fail spectacularly and embarrass everyone associated with them," Catherine replied. "Tell me, Mrs. Rowan, what exactly do you bring to this match besides a pretty face and debts my son is now obligated to settle?" The room went silent, except for the clink of crystal and silver. This was the moment. The challenge laid bare, stripped of all pretense. Eliza met Catherine's eyes directly. "I bring honesty, Your Grace. I won't pretend to be something I'm not or claim qualifications I don't possess. I'm not from an ancient family. I have no fortune, no powerful connections, no experience managing a great estate. What I do have is the willingness to learn from those wiser than myself, the humility to accept guidance, and the determination to prove myself through action rather than breeding. If that's insufficient, then perhaps you're right to doubt me. But I won't apologize for accepting an offer that gives me a chance at a better life while offering your son something he apparently needs. And what does my son need that 7 eligible women from the finest families in England cannot provide? Catherine's voice was ice. I don't presume to speak for Alexander, Eliza said carefully. You'll have to ask him. Every eye turned to Alexander, who had remained silent throughout the entire exchange. He set down his wine glass with deliberate care. What I need, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, is what I've chosen. Eliza understands that this match is based on mutual respect and compatible goals rather than social calculation or romantic illusion. She doesn't come to me with a list of demands or expectations regarding affection I'm incapable of providing. That honesty and clarity is worth more than any dowry or family connection. The words should have been reassuring, but they hit Eliza like blows. Incapable of providing affection. It was true, he'd told her as much. But hearing him say it so baldly in front of everyone made her feel like a purchased object rather than a person. How very practical, Lady Victoria said, her beautiful face twisted with something ugly. Though one wonders what happens when practicality isn't enough. When the novelty of your little arrangement wears thin, and Alexander realizes he's shackled himself to a woman so far beneath him that society will never let him forget it. Victoria, Alexander's voice went cold enough to frost the crystal. You forget yourself. Do I? Or am I simply saying what everyone else is thinking? Victoria stood, her hands clenched into fists. She's using you, Alexander. Can't you see that? She was desperate, drowning in debt, publicly humiliated, and you offered her a lifeline. Of course she accepted. Of course she's playing the part of devoted fiancée. What else can she do? But when this charade ends, and it will end, she'll walk away with a fortune while you're left looking like a fool who let his pity overcome his judgment. That's enough, Alexander said, rising to his feet. You will apologize to Eliza, or you will leave my house. Those are your only options. I won't apologize for speaking truth. Victoria's voice shook with emotion, rage, hurt, something desperate and raw. We've known each other since childhood, Alexander. Our families have been connected for generations. I've waited years for you to see me as more than a friend sister, more than a convenient dance partner. And now you expect me to smile and curtsy to her, to pretend this doesn't break my heart? The confession hung in the air, raw and painful. Eliza's chest tightened with unexpected sympathy. Victoria wasn't just an ambitious social climber. She was a woman in love with a man who would never love her back. I never gave you reason to hope for more than friendship, Alexander said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. If I did, I apologize, but my decision stands. Eliza is my choice. Accept it or leave. Victoria's face crumpled. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then her expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. Very well, she said quietly. I accept it. For now. But mark my words, Alexander. This will end in disaster. And when it does, don't expect me to help pick up the pieces. She swept from the room, leaving behind an awkward silence broken only by the nervous clearing of throats and the scrape of silverware against porcelain. Catherine dabbed her lips with her napkin. Well, that was illuminating. I trust the rest of you can control yourselves with more dignity? The other 6 women nodded, but their eyes held promises of vengeance that made Eliza's skin crawl. Victoria had been obvious in her attack. The others would be subtler, more dangerous. The rest of dinner passed in strained conversation, topics carefully neutral, voices artificially light. But beneath the surface, Eliza felt the currents of hostility and calculation swirling like sharks beneath a seemingly calm sea. When the meal finally ended and Catherine dismissed them, Eliza escaped to her room with relief that felt like drowning lungs finally drawing air. Annie was waiting with tea and sympathy. I heard what happened, miss. The staff always hears. Lady Victoria's maid says she's been crying for hours. I feel terrible for her, Eliza admitted, sinking into a chair. She loves him, genuinely loves him, and he'll never return it. His Grace doesn't believe in love, miss, Annie said quietly. Everyone knows the story, though we're not supposed to speak of it. His first engagement, years ago. The lady broke it off 3 days before the wedding, ran away with his best friend. The scandal nearly destroyed him. Since then, he's kept his heart locked away where no one can touch it. So that was the wound Mrs. Harding had mentioned. The betrayal that had turned Alexander into ice and stone. How terrible, Eliza whispered. Yes, miss. But it means he'll never hurt you the way Lady Victoria will be hurt. He's honest about what he can't give. There's mercy in that, even if it doesn't feel like it. After Annie left, Eliza prepared for bed with hands that still trembled from the evening's confrontations. She'd survived dinner, survived Victoria's attack, survived Catherine's cold assessment and the other women's subtle cruelties. But this was only the beginning. The war inside Hawthorne Manor had just started, and Eliza was fighting enemies on every front with no weapons except her wits and her desperate determination not to fail. She fell asleep with Alexander's words echoing in her mind. Incapable of providing affection. The truth she'd agreed to accept in exchange for security. But truth, Eliza was beginning to realize, had a way of shifting when you weren't looking. The next week brought new torments disguised as hospitality. Catherine insisted Eliza join the ladies for morning tea in the conservatory, a beautiful glass room filled with exotic plants and comfortable furniture where the 7 remaining women gathered daily to sharpen their claws on anyone unfortunate enough to be vulnerable. Mrs. Rowan, Lady Arabella greeted her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How delightful! Do join us! We were just discussing the upcoming charity ball at Ashworth Hall. You'll be attending as Alexander's fiancée, of course. I hadn't heard about it, Eliza admitted, taking the seat they'd left empty, positioned directly in the sun where the glare would make her squint and sweat. Oh, it's the event of the season, Lady Charlotte said. All of London society will attend. Everyone will want to meet you, examine you, judge whether you're truly suitable to be Duchess. No pressure, of course. She laughed, the sound like wind chimes made of knives. I'm sure Eliza will manage beautifully, Lady Diana Wentworth said with false warmth. Though it might help if she knew some of the people she'll be meeting. Perhaps we could assist. Test her knowledge of society, as it were? It was a trap, but Eliza had no choice but to step into it. That would be kind of you. For the next hour, they fired questions at her like artillery. Who was Lady Hampshire's second daughter? What was the history between the Ashford and Sinclair families? Which gentlemen were currently courting which ladies? What were the latest audits regarding the Prince Regent's behavior? Eliza failed nearly every question. She'd been isolated during her marriage, too poor and scandal-marked to move in these circles. The gaps in her knowledge were vast and obvious. Well, Catherine said when the interrogation finally ended, that was educational. Mrs. Rowan, you clearly have much to learn if you're to avoid humiliating yourself and my son at public events. I'll study, Eliza said quietly, fighting the urge to flee. I'm a quick learner when properly motivated. Motivation isn't the issue, child. Time is. The ball is in 2 weeks. You cannot possibly learn in 14 days what these ladies have absorbed over lifetimes of proper education and social immersion. Then I'll do my best and accept whatever consequences follow, Eliza said, lifting her chin despite the burning shame in her chest. Brave words. Catherine's smile was sharp as broken glass. We'll see if your courage survives the reality of being publicly evaluated and found wanting. But the real attack came 3 days later, during what should have been a simple afternoon walk through the estate gardens. Eliza had escaped the house seeking solitude, desperate for air that didn't feel thick with judgment. The gardens were extensive, acres of sculpted hedges, flowering paths, and hidden grottos that offered temporary sanctuary from hostile eyes. She was rounding a corner near the rose garden when she heard voices. Absolutely unsuitable. Even Alexander must see that. Eliza froze, recognizing Lady Eleanor's voice. He sees it, another voice replied, Cassandra. But his pride won't let him admit the mistake. Not yet. We need to force his hand, make the situation so untenable that he has no choice but to end the engagement. How? That was Arabella. He's already defended her publicly. Backing down now would make him look weak. Not if she's the one who proves herself unworthy. Eleanor's voice held calculation. We need evidence of impropriety. A scandal so damning that Alexander would be foolish to ignore it. What kind of scandal? Louisa asked. A compromising situation. Letters suggesting an inappropriate relationship with another man. Or perhaps witnesses claiming to have seen her in questionable circumstances. It wouldn't need to be true, just plausible enough to plant doubt. Eliza's blood turned to ice. They were planning to frame her, to manufacture evidence of infidelity or impropriety that would force Alexander to dissolve the engagement in disgrace. That's dangerous, Diana said slowly. If we're caught, we won't be caught if we're clever, Eleanor interrupted. And the reward is worth the risk. Alexander will be free to choose properly. One of us could still become Duchess. I'm in, Cassandra said immediately. I'll draft the letters, make them convincing but vague enough to avoid legal trouble. I'll arrange the witnesses, Arabella added. Servants can be bought, especially ones who resent the new mistress upsetting the household order. Then we're agreed? Eleanor's voice held grim satisfaction. We move forward, carefully, subtly, but decisively. Mrs. Rowan's time as Alexander's fiancée ends at the charity ball, in front of everyone who matters. Eliza pressed herself against the hedge, her heart hammering so hard she thought they must hear it. She waited until their footsteps faded, until the garden was silent, except for birdsong and the whisper of wind through leaves. Then she ran. She found Alexander in the stables examining a horse with one of the grooms. He looked up in surprise as she burst through the door, her careful composure shattered. Eliza, what's wrong? She told him everything, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. The overheard conversation, the plan to frame her, the conspiracy to destroy her reputation at the upcoming ball. Alexander's expression went cold, not with anger at her, but with a fury so controlled it was terrifying. They dare, he said softly. In my own house, they dare to plot against someone under my protection. What do we do? Eliza asked, her voice shaking. If they create evidence, if they make it convincing enough, they won't succeed. Alexander's voice was steel. But we can't simply confront them. They'll deny everything, claim you misheard or fabricated the entire story to eliminate rivals. We need proof of our own, evidence of their conspiracy. How do we get that? Alexander was silent for a long moment, his mind clearly working through possibilities. Then his eyes met hers, and she saw something new in them. Not warmth exactly, but respect. Perhaps even the beginnings of trust. We set a trap of our own, he said. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. But it will require you to be brave, Eliza. Braver than you've been yet. Can you do that? Eliza thought of Victoria's heartbreak, Catherine's contempt, the 7 women who saw her as nothing but an obstacle to be removed. She thought of the security Alexander had promised her, security that would vanish if their engagement ended in scandal. But mostly, she thought of the library, the sanctuary he'd given her, and the strange partnership they'd formed in the face of a hostile world. Yes, she said firmly. Tell me what you need me to do. Alexander smiled, a real smile, small and brief but genuine. I need you to pretend everything is fine. Attend tea, endure their questions, act like you suspect nothing. Meanwhile, I'll arrange for my most trusted servants to watch and listen. When they make their move, we'll be ready. And then? Then we show them what happens when they underestimate us both. The next 2 weeks felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Eliza attended every tea, every dinner, every excruciating social gathering with a smile fixed on her face while waiting for the trap to spring. She watched Eleanor and Cassandra exchange meaningful glances across the breakfast table. She noticed Arabella whispering to servants who looked at Eliza with suspicious eyes. She felt the net closing around her with every passing day. And through it all, Alexander watched. Not obviously, he was too skilled for that, but Eliza felt his attention like a shield at her back. His most trusted servants became her shadows, reporting conversations and movements she never witnessed herself. Mrs. Harding, it turned out, commanded a network of loyal staff who despised the visiting ladies' treatment of their new mistress. They've drafted 3 letters, Mrs. Harding reported one morning while helping Eliza dress. supposedly from you to a gentleman named Edward Marsh. They mention private meetings, intimate conversations, regret about your engagement to the Duke, all carefully worded to suggest impropriety without explicitly stating it. Eliza's hands trembled as she fastened her necklace. Who is Edward Marsh? A minor gentleman who attended Oxford with the Duke. Respectable family, unremarkable reputation. The perfect choice. Believable enough to be plausible. Obscure enough that he won't immediately deny the connection before they can do damage. When will they make their move? At the ball tomorrow night. Mrs. Harding's expression was grim. Lady Eleanor has arranged for the letters to be discovered in your room that afternoon. She'll bring them to the Dowager Duchess, who will confront you publicly during the ball. Maximum humiliation, maximum witnesses. And Alexander? Is ready. But Miss Eliza... Mrs. Harding hesitated. The Duke has requested something of you, something that will require considerable courage. What does he need? He needs you to let them find the letters, to act surprised when confronted, to defend yourself passionately but without revealing you knew about the plot. He needs the conspiracy to unfold completely before he springs his own trap. Can you do that? Can you endure public accusation and humiliation while trusting him to defend you? Every instinct screamed at Eliza to refuse. She'd already been humiliated at the Ashworth Hall ball, already endured weeks of subtle attacks and cruel whispers. The thought of standing before hundreds of society's elite while being accused of infidelity made her physically ill. But she thought of Alexander's rare smile when she'd agreed to help. She thought of the partnership they'd formed against a hostile world. She thought of the alternative, fleeing back to poverty and obscurity while the women who'd tried to destroy her celebrated their victory. I can do it, Eliza said quietly. Tell Alexander I'll play my part, Mrs. Harding's stern expression softened into something almost maternal. You're braver than you know, child. Don't forget that when the storm breaks tomorrow. The day of the ball dawned clear and cold, the kind of perfect autumn weather that made everything seem sharper, more vivid. Eliza woke early, her stomach churning with anxiety she couldn't show. Today she would be tested in ways she'd never imagined. Today she would either prove herself or be destroyed. Madame Levesque arrived at noon with the gown she'd created for this moment, a masterpiece of deep burgundy silk that made Eliza look like something between a queen and a warrior. The bodice was cut daringly low, the skirt designed to move like water, the color so rich it seemed to glow in lamplight. You will be magnificent, Madame Levesque declared as Annie arranged Eliza's hair in an elegant style woven through with garnets. Let them try to diminish you in this. Let them try. At 3 o'clock, while Eliza was supposedly resting before the evening's events, Eleanor and Cassandra made their move. Eliza lay on her bed with a book she wasn't reading, listening to the soft sounds of footsteps in the corridor. A key turned in her lock. Eleanor must have bribed one of the maids. Whispers, barely audible, the rustle of paper being placed carefully among her belongings. Then silence. Footsteps retreating. The satisfied sound of a trap successfully set. Eliza waited 10 minutes before rising to examine the damage. The letters were tucked into her writing desk drawer, positioned to look hidden, but not well enough to avoid discovery by someone searching her room. She opened one with trembling fingers. My dearest Edward, I think of our afternoon in the garden constantly. The stolen moments we share are the only genuine joy in this gilded cage I've locked myself into. Alexander suspects nothing. He's too consumed with his own concerns to notice my heart belongs elsewhere. Sometimes I wonder if I should simply confess everything and accept the scandal. At least then I would be free to pursue what my heart truly desires. Yours in secret, E. It was convincing, damning, exactly the kind of evidence that would destroy her reputation and force Alexander to end their engagement in disgrace. Eliza returned the letter to the drawer and sat down to wait. The confrontation came at 7, an hour before they were scheduled to leave for the ball. Catherine swept into Eliza's room without knocking, Eleanor and Arabella flanking her like avenging angels. In Catherine's hand were the 3 forged letters. Explain these, Catherine commanded, her voice cold enough to freeze blood. Eleanor discovered them while searching for a shawl she'd lent you last week. Imagine her shock at finding love letters to a man who is decidedly not my son. Eliza stood, forcing her voice to remain steady even as her heart raced. I don't understand, Your Grace. What letters? Don't play innocent, Eleanor snapped. We found them in your writing desk. Letters to Edward Marsh discussing secret meetings and regretting your engagement to Alexander. Did you think you could deceive him indefinitely, use him for his protection and money while carrying on an affair? I've never written such letters, Eliza said, letting her voice rise with genuine anger. Easy enough when the accusation was real, even if the evidence was false. I don't even know anyone named Edward Marsh. The letters are in your hand, Arabella said triumphantly, or a convincing forgery of it. Either way, they prove you're unfit to be Duchess. Catherine's eyes were like chips of ice. Is this true, Mrs. Rowan? Have you been conducting an inappropriate relationship while claiming to be engaged to my son? No. Eliza met her gaze directly. I have not. Those letters are fabrications, and if you examine them closely, you'll see— I see enough, Catherine interrupted. I see that you came into this house under false pretenses, presenting yourself as grateful and humble when in reality you're nothing but a scheming opportunist. Alexander will hear about this immediately. Your engagement is over. On what evidence? Eliza demanded, abandoning pretense now and letting her fury show. 3 letters that could have been written by anyone? You want to destroy my future based on evidence that appears convenient and coincidental mere hours before the most important social event of the season? The timing is unfortunate, Eleanor said with false sympathy. But truth has a way of emerging at inopportune moments. Truth, Eliza repeated, her voice sharp as broken glass. Or conspiracy? Tell me, Lady Eleanor, how exactly did you happen to be searching my room for a shawl you never actually lent me? Eleanor's face paled slightly. That's irrelevant. The letters exist. That's what matters. Is it? Eliza took a step forward, channeling every ounce of righteous anger she possessed. Or does what matters is that you and your friends have spent weeks trying to drive me away because you can't accept that Alexander chose someone you consider beneath him? That you've schemed and plotted and now you've manufactured evidence to force his hand? How dare you, Arabella gasped. We've done no such thing. Haven't you? Eliza's voice rang through the room. You think I haven't noticed the whispers, the tests, the constant attempts to humiliate me? You think I don't know what you really want? Enough. Catherine's command silenced them all. Whether these letters are real or fabricated, their existence creates a situation that cannot be ignored. Mrs. Rowan, you will not attend the ball tonight. You will remain in your room while I discuss this matter with Alexander. If he chooses to continue the engagement despite this evidence, that is his decision. But I will make my opinion clear. You are not suitable to be Duchess of Thornbury, and tonight's scandal only proves it. She swept out, Eleanor and Arabella following with expressions of barely concealed triumph. They'd won, or thought they had. Eliza sank onto her bed, her hand shaking now that the confrontation was over. She'd played her part. Now everything depended on Alexander. 20 minutes later, he arrived. He entered without knocking, his face a mask of cold fury that made Eliza's breath catch. For a terrifying moment, she wondered if he actually believed the accusations. Then he closed the door and his expression shifted, still angry, but not at her. They moved exactly as predicted, he said quietly. My servants witnessed Eleanor placing the letters in your desk this afternoon. We have 3 witnesses willing to testify that the letters are forgeries, along with evidence that Cassandra purchased the paper and ink from a shop in London last week using a false name. Relief flooded through Eliza so intensely she felt dizzy. Then we have them. We have them. Alexander's smile was cold and dangerous. The question now is how we proceed. I can expose them privately, send them away from Hawthorne Manor in disgrace but without public scandal. Or, he paused. We can do this publicly, at the ball, in front of everyone who matters. Destroy their reputations as thoroughly as they attempted to destroy yours. Won't that create exactly the kind of scandal you were trying to avoid? Eliza asked. Yes, but it will also send a message that anyone who threatens someone under my protection will face consequences they can't imagine. The choice is yours, Eliza. You're the one they tried to destroy. You should decide their fate. The power in that offer was intoxicating. Eliza thought of Eleanor's cold calculation, Cassandra's willingness to forge evidence, Arabella's triumphant expression when Catherine had confronted her. They'd been willing to destroy her completely without hesitation or remorse. But she also thought of Victoria's heartbroken confession, of women trapped in a world where their only power came from the marriages they made, of the desperation that drove people to cruelty. "Private exposure," she said finally. "Send them away. Make sure they understand what they did and why it failed. But don't destroy them publicly. That makes us no better than them." Alexander studied her for a long moment. "You're more merciful than I would be." "I'm practical. Public scandal creates enemies. Private disgrace creates cautionary tales. Let them go home knowing they failed and that you protected me. That's victory enough." "Very well." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Eliza, what you did today, standing up to my mother, defending yourself knowing I would come, that took remarkable courage. Thank you." The sincerity in his voice made something warm unfold in Eliza's chest. "We're partners in this arrangement, aren't we? Partners protect each other." Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite name. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual controlled expression. "Get dressed. We have a ball to attend and a conspiracy to quietly dismantle." The Ashworth Hall ballroom blazed with light and music and the cream of English society dressed in their finest. Eliza entered on Alexander's arm, her burgundy gown drawing every eye, the sapphire ring catching the chandelier light and throwing blue fire across the polished floor. Whispers followed them like smoke. Everyone had heard rumors about the Duke's shocking engagement to an impoverished widow. Now they'd finally see her in person, judge whether she was worthy of the impossible position she'd claimed. "Ignore them," Alexander murmured as they descended the main staircase. "You're magnificent. Let them stare." Catherine stood near the bottom of the stairs, her face carefully neutral. Eleanor, Cassandra, and Arabella clustered behind her, their expressions uncertain now. They'd expected Eliza to be confined to her room in disgrace, not arriving in triumph on Alexander's arm. "Your Grace," Alexander said coldly to his mother, "I believe you have something to discuss with me regarding my fiancée." Catherine's jaw tightened. "Perhaps we should speak privately." "No." Alexander's voice carried across the suddenly silent ballroom. "If you have accusations to make them publicly. Let society judge the evidence and decide its merit." "Alexander, this isn't necessary," Catherine began, but he cut her off. "I believe it is. You've questioned Eliza's character based on letters supposedly found in her possession, letters claiming an inappropriate relationship with a gentleman named Edward Marsh. Is that correct?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Catherine's face went pale. "I merely thought—" "You thought wrong." Alexander's voice was ice. "Those letters were forgeries planted by certain individuals who hoped to destroy Eliza's reputation and force me to end our engagement. I have witnesses who saw the letters being placed. I have evidence of their purchase from a London stationer. I have proof of conspiracy against a woman under my protection." The ballroom erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, shocked exclamations. Eleanor looked ready to faint. Cassandra gripped Arabella's arm so tightly her knuckles went white. "This is impossible," Eleanor stammered. "You can't prove—" "I can prove everything." Alexander gestured to a servant who stepped forward with a leather folder. "Witness statements, shop receipts, correspondence between the conspirators planning their attack. Would you like me to read them aloud, or would you prefer to leave quietly and never return?" "Alexander," Catherine said, her voice shaking with rage or shock Eliza couldn't tell. "You're creating a scandal far worse than necessary. I'm protecting my fiancé from vipers masquerading as house guests," Alexander interrupted. "Ladies Eleanor, Cassandra, and Arabella, you have 1 hour to collect your belongings and leave Hawthorne Manor. If you ever attempt to contact me, my mother, or Eliza again, I will make public every detail of your conspiracy. Am I understood?" The 3 women fled, their exit watched by hundreds of fascinated eyes. The remaining 4 ladies, Victoria, Charlotte, Louisa, and Diana, stood frozen, their faces pale with shock. "As for the rest of you," Alexander said, his gaze sweeping over them, "you're welcome to remain as my mother's guests, but understand this. Eliza Rowan is to be my wife. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Anyone who attempts to undermine her will face consequences that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Choose your allegiances carefully." He turned to Catherine. Mother, I love you. I respect your concern for the family legacy, but I will not tolerate interference in my choice of bride. Accept Eliza with grace, or I will establish my own household, and you will find yourself with significantly less influence over my affairs. The decision is yours. Catherine's face was a battleground of emotions: fury, shock, wounded pride, and beneath it all, something that might have been grudging respect. Her son had just publicly defied her in the most dramatic way possible. He'd chosen a nobody widow over the comfort of his mother's approval and the expectations of their entire social class. Very well, she said finally, her voice tight. I accept your choice, but don't expect me to celebrate it. I don't expect celebration. I expect civility. Alexander offered Eliza his arm. Shall we dance, my dear? I believe we've given society enough entertainment for one evening. The music started. A waltz, elegant and sweeping. Alexander led Eliza onto the floor, his hand warm against the small of her back, his other hand holding hers with gentle firmness. That was not the private resolution we discussed, Eliza said quietly as they began to move. No, I changed my mind. His gray eyes met hers. You deserved a public vindication. You deserved to see your enemies exposed and humiliated the way they tried to expose and humiliate you. I should have asked your permission first, but I decided your dignity was worth the scandal. Something shifted in Eliza's chest, something dangerous and warm and entirely unexpected. Thank you, she whispered. No one has ever defended me like that. Get used to it. His voice was rough with emotion she'd never heard from him before. You're mine to protect now. That means something. They danced in silence for a moment, moving through the crowd of watching couples. Then Alexander spoke again, his voice so low only she could hear. Eliza, this arrangement we've made, this temporary engagement designed to protect us both, I need to discuss its terms. Her heart lurched. Was he ending it after all? Had the scandal changed his mind? What about them? She asked carefully. They're insufficient. He met her eyes directly. When we made this agreement, I thought I could maintain emotional distance. I thought I could share my home, my name, my protection without risking my heart. I was wrong. The ballroom seemed to spin. Alexander, I don't understand. I'm falling in love with you. The words came out harsh, almost angry, as if he resented the admission even as he made it. I watch you face down hostile women with more courage than most men show on battlefields. I listen to you debate philosophy in my library. I see the kindness you show servants, the mercy you offered enemies who deserved none. And I realize that everything I thought I wanted, safety, distance, control, is worthless compared to the possibility of something real with you. Eliza's breath caught. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't part of their agreement. This was dangerous, terrifying, impossible. Marry me, Alexander said, and his voice held a vulnerability she'd never heard before. Not as part of an arrangement, not temporarily. Marry me because you want to, because you see something in me worth loving despite my coldness and my wounds and my absolute certainty that I'd never feel this way again. The ballroom, the music, the hundreds of watching eyes, all of it faded away until there was nothing but Alexander's face, his gray eyes holding hers with desperate hope and fear. Eliza thought of Thomas, her first husband who'd promised love and delivered only debt and disappointment. She thought of the poverty she'd escaped, the security Alexander offered, the comfortable lie of their arrangement, and she thought of the terror of trusting someone with her heart again, of believing that this time love might not destroy her. No, she said. Alexander's face went blank with shock. What? No. Eliza stopped dancing, her hand slipping from his. Around them, couples paused, sensing drama. I won't marry you. Not like this. Eliza, I've been in a loveless marriage, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I know what it's like to wake up next to someone who promised affection and delivered only neglect. I won't do that again, not even for security, not even for you. I'm offering you love, Alexander said, anger and hurt warring in his expression. Real love. How is that the same as your first marriage? Because you don't trust it. Eliza's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. You say you're falling in love, but you're terrified of it. You're waiting for me to betray you like she did, waiting for the hurt you're certain is coming. That's not love, Alexander. That's fear dressed up as affection, and I deserve better than someone who's already planning for me to break his heart. The truth of it hung between them like a blade. Around them, the ballroom had gone utterly silent. Everyone was watching, listening, witnessing the Duke of Thornbury being rejected by the woman he'd just publicly defended. "You're right," Alexander said finally, his voice barely audible. "I am afraid. I'm terrified of loving you and losing you. Terrified of opening myself up to that kind of pain again, but I hoped, that despite my fear you might still choose me. And I thought," Eliza whispered, "that despite my fear, I might choose you too. But not like this. Not until you can look at me without waiting for betrayal. Not until you can trust that I'm not her." She turned and walked away, her burgundy gown trailing behind her like blood, leaving Alexander standing alone in the center of the ballroom while hundreds of eyes watched in shocked silence. The whispers started immediately. Eliza heard them as she climbed the stairs, fled down corridors, finally reached the sanctuary of the library where this had all begun. She rejected him. The Duke proposed, and she said no. Is she mad? Throwing away her one chance at security? Perhaps she truly does have some integrity after all. Or perhaps she's the biggest fool in England. Eliza collapsed into one of the reading chairs, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and terror at what she'd just done. She'd gambled everything, her security, her future, her one chance at escaping poverty, on the slim hope that honesty would be worth more than comfortable lies. And now she had nothing. No engagement, no protection, no shield against a world that had already proven its cruelty. The door opened. Eliza looked up expecting Annie or Mrs. Harding and found Catherine instead. The Dowager Duchess closed the door behind her and studied Eliza with those steel-gray eyes so like her son's. "That," Catherine said finally, "was either the bravest thing I've ever witnessed or the most foolish. I haven't decided which." "Does it matter?" Eliza asked wearily. "Either way, I've destroyed my chances." "Have you?" Catherine moved to the chair opposite Eliza's and sat with surprising informality. "You just told one of the most powerful men in England that his love isn't good enough, that you demand more than security and protection, that you refuse to settle for anything less than trust and genuine affection. Do you know how rare that is? How extraordinary?" "It's suicidal," Eliza said. "I had everything I needed, safety, money, a future, and I threw it away because I couldn't accept love wrapped in fear." "No," Catherine's voice was firm. "You threw it away because you have standards, because you understand that a loveless marriage, even a comfortable one, is its own kind of prison. You demanded my son meet you as an equal without the armor he's worn since Rebecca destroyed him. You forced him to confront his own cowardice." "Rebecca?" Eliza repeated. "His first fiancée?" "Yes. Beautiful, accomplished, from an excellent family. Everyone assumed they were perfect for each other. Then 3 days before the wedding, she ran away with his best friend, a man with half Alexander's wealth but apparently twice his capacity for affection. The scandal nearly broke him. Since then, he's kept everyone at a distance, convinced that love is just another word for eventual betrayal. And now I've confirmed his worst fears," Eliza said miserably. "I've rejected him just like she did." "Or you've given him a choice," Catherine said quietly. "Stay safe behind his walls and lose you, or take the risk of trusting again and maybe, possibly, find something worth the fear. You've put the decision in his hands. Now we wait to see what he chooses." She stood, smoothing her gown. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Rowan, Eliza, I was wrong about you. You're not a fortune hunter or an opportunist. You're a woman of remarkable courage who refuses to compromise her integrity even when it would be easier to do so. If my son is too frightened to see that, then he doesn't deserve you." She left before Eliza could respond, leaving her alone in the library with books and shadows and the terrible uncertainty of what came next. Hours passed. The ball ended, carriages departed, the house fell silent. Eliza remained in the library, unable to face her room or the servants' sympathetic eyes or the reality of what morning would bring. She must have dozed because suddenly someone was shaking her shoulder gently. She opened her eyes to find Alexander kneeling beside her chair, his formal clothes disheveled, his hair falling across his forehead, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "I'm afraid," he said without preamble. "I'm absolutely terrified of loving you and losing you, of opening my heart and having it shattered again. That fear is real and probably won't disappear overnight." Eliza sat up slowly, her own heart hammering. "Alexander, but I'm more afraid of not trying," he continued, his voice rough. "More afraid of letting you walk away because I was too much of a coward to risk being hurt. You were right about everything. I was already planning for your betrayal, already protecting myself against pain I decided was inevitable. That's not love. That's not what you deserve." He took her hands in his, and she felt them trembling. "I don't know if I can give you the kind of trust that comes easily," he said. "I don't know if I can stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I'm willing to try. Willing to work every day to become someone worthy of your standards. Willing to be honest about my fears instead of hiding behind them. If you'll give me the chance." Eliza looked into his eyes and saw past the fear to the hope beneath it. Fragile, terrified hope that she might say yes this time. "This won't be easy," she said quietly. "We're both damaged, both scared, both convinced that love is just a prelude to loss. I know. We'll hurt each other, make mistakes, have to learn how to trust when everything in our history says trust is dangerous. I know that too. And you're still asking?" "I'm still asking." His grip on her hands tightened. "Eliza Rowan, will you marry me? Not as an arrangement, not as protection, but as a real marriage between two people who are choosing to be brave together?" The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll choose courage over safety. I'll risk my heart if you'll risk yours." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, not gently, but with desperate relief and overwhelming need and the reckless vulnerability of someone who'd finally stopped hiding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, and this time the words held no anger or resentment, just truth. "I love you too," Eliza replied. "I'm terrified of it, but I love you anyway." "Then we'll be terrified together." He smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine and beautiful. "And maybe, eventually, we'll learn not to be." Outside, dawn was breaking over Hawthorne Manor, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A new day, a new beginning, a chance to build something real from the ashes of their carefully constructed arrangement. It wouldn't be easy. But then, nothing worth having ever was. They stayed in the library until the sun climbed fully above the horizon, talking in whispers about everything and nothing. Alexander told her about Rebecca, not just the betrayal but the years before it when he'd slowly realized their engagement was built on his family's expectations rather than any genuine connection. Eliza told him about Thomas, about the slow erosion of hope that came from watching someone you'd trusted destroy themselves and take you down with them. "We're quite a pair," Alexander said finally, his arm around her shoulders as they sat together on the window seat, watching the estate wake below them. "Two people so damaged by the past that falling in love feels like jumping off a cliff." "Maybe it is," Eliza replied, her head resting against his shoulder. "But at least we're jumping together." A knock at the library door interrupted them. Mrs. Harding entered, took one look at their intertwined forms, and allowed herself a small smile. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, Mrs. Rowan, but the household is beginning to stir, and there are complications that require attention." Alexander straightened. "What kind of complications?" "The Dowager Duchess has summoned the remaining ladies to the morning room. She's requested your presence as well, both of you." Mrs. Harding's expression was carefully neutral. "I believe she intends to address last night's events and establish new household expectations." Eliza's stomach nodded. The memory of Catherine's unexpected support last night was still vivid, but morning light had a way of changing perspectives. Had the Dowager Duchess reconsidered? Decided that Alexander's public proposal and Eliza's public rejection had created too much scandal to overlook? "We'll be there shortly," Alexander said. "Give us 10 minutes to make ourselves presentable." After Mrs. Harding left, Eliza turned to Alexander with worry clear in her eyes. What if she's changed her mind? What if the scandal? Then we face it together. He stood and offered his hand. No more hiding, no more pretending. We meet whatever comes with honesty. The morning room was filled with cold autumn sunlight that made the tension inside feel even sharper. Catherine sat in the position of authority, her silver hair perfectly arranged, her expression unreadable. Victoria, Charlotte, Louisa, and Diana occupied chairs arranged in a semicircle, their faces varying degrees of uncomfortable. All conversation stopped when Alexander and Eliza entered, still wearing their ball clothes from the night before, their appearance making it clear they'd spent the hours since talking rather than sleeping. Alexander, Eliza. Catherine's voice gave nothing away. Please sit. We have matters to discuss that affect everyone present. They took seats together, Alexander's hand finding Eliza's and holding it with quiet defiance. Whatever Catherine had to say, they would face it united. Last night, Catherine began, this household was rocked by scandal, conspiracy, and a very public rejection of a very public proposal. The gossip is already spreading through London like wildfire. By this evening, every drawing room in England will be discussing the Duke of Thornbury and his unsuitable widow. Eliza's grip on Alexander's hand tightened, but she kept her expression calm. However, Catherine continued, and something shifted in her voice, I have spent the night reflecting on what transpired and why. Lady Eleanor, Lady Cassandra, and Lady Arabella were removed from this house in disgrace for conspiring against a guest under our protection. That conspiracy revealed something I had been willfully ignoring, the toxic environment we've allowed to flourish here. She turned her steel-gray gaze on the remaining 4 women, Ladies Victoria, Charlotte, Louisa, and Diana. You did not participate in the forgery plot, but neither did you object when you must have known something was planned. You allowed jealousy and wounded pride to blind you to basic decency. That ends now. Victoria's face flushed crimson. Your Grace, I never intended... Intentions are irrelevant. Actions are what matter. Catherine's voice was sharp. Each of you came to Hawthorne Manor as my guest, and I take responsibility for creating an atmosphere where cruelty seemed acceptable. But that atmosphere changes today. You have a choice. Accept Eliza as Alexander's choice with genuine respect, or leave this house and accept that any future association with this family is forfeit. The silence that followed was absolute. Eliza held her breath, waiting to see which way they would jump. Lady Diana Wentworth spoke first, her voice quiet but clear. Your Grace, Mrs. Rowan, Eliza, I owe you an apology. I was cruel because I was disappointed, and disappointment is no excuse for treating another person with contempt. If you're willing to forgive me, I would like to try to do better. Louisa nodded quickly. I feel the same. We were wrong, and I'm ashamed of how we behaved. You've shown more grace under pressure than any of us could have managed. Charlotte was slower, her pride clearly warring with pragmatism. Finally, she spoke. I still think this match is unconventional, but Lady Pemberton, my cousin, was wrong to treat you so cruelly at the ball, and I was wrong to echo her sentiments. You've proven yourself braver than I would have been in your position. That deserves respect. All eyes turned to Victoria. The beautiful blonde who'd confessed her love for Alexander looked like she was fighting tears, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. I can't promise to celebrate your engagement, she said directly to Eliza. I can't pretend my feelings for Alexander disappeared overnight, but I can promise not to undermine you or cause further trouble. You rejected him in front of everyone when accepting would have given you everything you needed. That took courage I don't possess. If Alexander believes you're worth loving, then I'll trust his judgment, even if it breaks my heart. The raw honesty of it made Eliza's throat tighten. Thank you, she said quietly. All of you. I know this isn't easy. I know my presence here disrupts expectations and creates complications, but I promise to work every day to earn the respect you're offering. Catherine's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Well then, that's settled. Ladies, you may remain as my guests for the duration of the house party, provided civility prevails. Eliza, you and I will need to discuss your new position in this household. Alexander, I assume you have wedding plans to make? Actually, Alexander said, his voice carefully controlled, I should clarify something. When I proposed last night, when Eliza rejected me, it was because she recognized I was still trapped by fear, still expecting betrayal, still protecting myself against pain I assumed was inevitable. He stood, pulling Eliza up with him, and addressed the room with complete honesty. I proposed again in the library at dawn, without fear this time, without expecting her to hurt me. I offered her a real marriage based on trust and love rather than protection and convenience. And this time, she said yes. Gasps rippled through the room. Catherine's eyebrows rose. Victoria's face went pale, but she managed a trembling smile. So our engagement stands, Alexander continued, but on different terms than before. Not an arrangement designed to discourage matchmaking, but a genuine commitment to build a life together. Anyone who can't accept that should leave now. No one moved. Catherine stood slowly, walked to where they stood, and studied them both with those penetrating gray eyes. "And you're certain?" she asked Alexander. "Certain enough to risk your heart again? Certain enough to defy society's judgment and weather the inevitable criticism?" "I'm certain," Alexander said without hesitation. "Eliza is the bravest, most honest person I've ever met. She demands I be better than my fears. That's exactly what I need." Catherine turned to Eliza. "And you? Are you certain you want this life? The scrutiny, the responsibility, the weight of a duchess's duties when you've had no training for them?" Eliza met her gaze directly. "I'm terrified, Your Grace. But I'm choosing courage over safety, love over security, the risk of being hurt over the certainty of being alone. Yes, I'm certain." Something remarkable happened then. Catherine smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine and approving. "Then you have my blessing," she said, "and more than that, you have my support. If you're to be Duchess of Thornbury, we'll need to prepare you properly. No more treating you as a temporary inconvenience. Starting today, I'll teach you everything you need to know." Eliza's eyes widened. You'll help me?" "You stood in my library last night and told me you refused to settle for anything less than real love. That's exactly the kind of strength this family needs. Besides," Catherine's smile turned wry, "if my stubborn son is finally willing to risk his heart again, the least I can do is ensure his duchess is properly equipped to manage the chaos that will follow." The relief that flooded through Eliza was so intense she swayed slightly. Alexander steadied her, his arm around her waist. "Thank you, Mother," he said quietly. "That means more than you know." "Yes, well," Catherine cleared her throat, emotions clearly making her uncomfortable. "Don't make me regret it. Now then, ladies, I believe breakfast is being served. Eliza, you'll join me afterward for your first lesson in household management. We have 6 weeks until the wedding and a considerable amount of work to accomplish in that time." The women filed out toward the dining room, some looking genuinely pleased, others still processing the dramatic shift in household dynamics. Victoria lingered, approaching Eliza with visible effort. "I meant what I said," she told Eliza quietly. "I'll respect your position and cause no trouble. But I need you to understand. I've loved Alexander since I was 17. Watching him choose someone else is—" She paused, struggling for words. "It's destroying me. So if I'm sometimes cool or distant, it's not malice. It's self-preservation." "I understand," Eliza said gently, "and I'm sorry. I never meant to cause you pain." "I know," Victoria managed a smile, "which somehow makes it worse. You're genuinely kind, genuinely worthy of him. I can't even hate you properly. It's terribly frustrating." She left before Eliza could respond, her shoulders straight despite the heartbreak evident in every line of her body. "That took courage," Alexander observed, acknowledging her feelings while promising not to act on them. "Everyone here is braver than they realize," Eliza said. "They just needed permission to show it." The next weeks transformed Hawthorne Manor from a battlefield into something almost resembling a home. Catherine threw herself into Eliza's education with surprising enthusiasm, teaching her the intricate details of managing a great estate, how to direct staff without being dictatorial, how to plan menus for formal dinners, how to navigate the complex social hierarchies that governed every interaction among the aristocracy, how to keep household accounts, manage charitable obligations, and maintained the delicate balance between authority and approachability that defined a successful duchess. "You're a quick study," Catherine observed one afternoon as they reviewed guest lists for the wedding. "Far quicker than most women born to this life. Poverty taught you resourcefulness that wealth never could." "Poverty taught me that every decision has consequences," Eliza replied, checking names against Alexander's list of family obligations. "That resources are finite and must be carefully managed. That respect is earned through action rather than assumed through birth." Precisely the lessons many aristocrats never learn. Catherine made a note on the seating chart they were developing. "You'll be a better duchess than half the women currently holding the title. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The praise still felt strange, but Eliza was learning to accept it without suspicion. The remaining ladies gradually shifted from hostile observers to something resembling allies. Louisa helped Eliza understand the subtle social signals that governed ballroom behavior. Diana coached her through the expectations surrounding charitable work and patronage. Even Charlotte, initially the most resistant, began offering advice on fashion and presentation. "If you're going to be Duchess," Charlotte said one morning while they reviewed fabric samples for Eliza's wedding gown, "you might as well look the part. Madame Levesque is brilliant, but she needs guidance on what current fashion actually demands versus what's merely trendy." Victoria remained distant but scrupulously polite, keeping her promise to cause no trouble while clearly struggling with her own heartbreak. Eliza found herself respecting the woman's dignity, even as she felt guilty for being the source of her pain. But the real transformation happened in the quiet moments with Alexander. They spent hours in the library, reading side by side or debating philosophy and politics. He taught her to ride. Eliza had never been on a horse before, and discovered she had natural talent once she overcame her initial terror. She introduced him to novels he'd dismissed as frivolous and watched him become absorbed in stories he'd never given themselves permission to enjoy. They talked about their fears with an honesty that still felt dangerous, but increasingly necessary. Alexander admitted he still sometimes expected her to disappear or betray him, that Rebecca's ghost still haunted him in moments of vulnerability. Eliza confessed that she sometimes woke in panic, convinced this was all a dream and she'd return to poverty when morning came. "We're both damaged," Alexander said one evening as they walked through the gardens in the fading light. "Both carrying wounds that don't heal just because we want them to." "But we're healing together," Eliza replied, her hand in his. "That has to count for something." "It counts for everything." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Eliza, I need you to understand something. When we marry, you're not obligated to perform or pretend. If you need space, take it. If you're overwhelmed, tell me. If you regret this choice, I'd rather know than have you suffer in silence." "I don't regret it," she said firmly. "I'm terrified, yes. Uncertain about whether I can really do this, absolutely. But I don't regret choosing you, choosing us." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, a kiss that held promise rather than demand. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I'm still learning how to show it properly. But I love you." "I love you too," she whispered back. "We'll learn together." The real test came 3 weeks before the wedding, when Lady Pemberton, Charlotte's cousin, and the woman who'd publicly humiliated Eliza at the original ball arrived for an unexpected visit. Eliza was in the morning room with Catherine and the other ladies when Mrs. Harding announced the guest. Every head turned toward the doorway where Lady Pemberton stood, resplendent in traveling clothes and radiating the same cold superiority Eliza remembered from that terrible night. "Catherine," Lady Pemberton said, embracing the Dowager Duchess with familiarity, "how wonderful to see you. I heard the most extraordinary rumors about Alexander's engagement and simply had to confirm them in person." Her gaze swept over Eliza with the same dismissive contempt she'd shown weeks ago. "Mrs. Rowan, still here, I see. Though now I'm told you're to be Duchess. How remarkable." The old Eliza would have shrunk under that gaze, accepting the judgment as her due. But the woman who'd stood up to conspiracies, demanded real love instead of convenient arrangements, and spent weeks learning to navigate aristocratic society was not the same person who'd sat alone at that ball. "Lady Pemberton," Eliza said calmly, standing to meet her as an equal. "How kind of you to visit. I trust your daughter's marriage is flourishing? Exceptionally well, no thanks to the scandal your husband created before his death. Lady Pemberton settled into a chair uninvited. But then, you're quite familiar with scandal, aren't you? First a disastrous marriage to a gambling wastrel, then somehow ensnaring one of England's most eligible dukes. One has to admire your persistence, if not your methods. Careful, Margaret, Catherine said quietly. You're speaking to the future Duchess of Thornbury. I suggest you choose your words with more consideration. The future Duchess, Lady Pemberton repeated with acid sweetness. Yes, about that. Society is absolutely buzzing with speculation about how this match came to be. Some say it was a calculated trap. Others claim Alexander felt obligated to rescue you from destitution out of misplaced charity. No one, and I mean no one, believes this is a genuine love match. The other ladies shifted uncomfortably. Charlotte looked mortified by her cousin's behavior. Victoria's expression was carefully blank. Eliza felt Alexander's teachings crystallize in her mind. Don't shrink from confrontation. Don't accept others' judgments as truth. Stand firm in what you know to be real. What society believes is irrelevant to what Alexander and I know to be true, Eliza said clearly. Yes, our engagement began as an arrangement. Yes, I was desperate, and he needed protection from matchmaking. But somewhere between convenience and calculation, we discovered something neither of us expected: genuine affection built on mutual respect and shared vulnerability. If society chooses not to believe that, it says more about their cynicism than our relationship. How very rehearsed, Lady Pemberton sneered. Did Catherine teach you that speech? No one taught me. Eliza's voice hardened. I learned through experience that other people's judgments matter far less than my own integrity. You decided I was worthless based on my late husband's debts and my lack of family connections. You humiliated me publicly, dismissed my humanity, and treated me like something scraped off your shoe. But your contempt didn't make me worthless. It revealed your cruelty. Lady Pemberton's face flushed crimson. How dare you speak to me? With honesty? Eliza interrupted. Yes, how dare I? Women in my position are supposed to accept insults gracefully, aren't we? Smile while being told we don't belong. Thank our betters for deigning to acknowledge our existence. Well, I won't do that anymore. I've learned that dignity isn't something conferred by birth or wealth. It's something you choose to maintain regardless of how others treat you. This is outrageous, Lady Pemberton sputtered, turning to Catherine. Are you going to allow this nobody to insult me in your home? Eliza is not a nobody, Catherine said with icy calm. She's my son's fiancée and soon to be a member of this family. More importantly, everything she said is accurate. You were cruel to her, Margaret, unnecessarily and publicly cruel. If she chooses to call you out for that behavior, she has every right. Lady Pemberton stood, trembling with rage and humiliation. I will not remain in a house where I'm treated with such disrespect. Charlotte, gather your things. We're leaving immediately. Charlotte stayed seated. No, Cousin Margaret, I'm staying. Excuse me? I'm staying, Charlotte repeated, her voice strengthening. You were wrong about Eliza. I was wrong about her. We all were. She's proven herself worthy of respect, and I won't leave just because you refuse to acknowledge that. Lady Pemberton stared at her cousin in disbelief, then swept her gaze around the room. Every woman present, Catherine, Charlotte, Louisa, Diana, even Victoria, met her eyes with varying degrees of defiance. Fine, Lady Pemberton spat. Stay and associate with fortune hunters and social climbers if you wish, but don't expect the rest of society to follow your example. This match will be the scandal of the decade, and you'll all be tainted by association. She stormed out, her exit watched in silence until the sound of her carriage faded down the drive. Catherine turned to Eliza with unmistakable pride in her eyes. That, my dear, was magnificent. You've just passed the most important test of aristocratic life, standing up to a bully without losing your composure or your dignity. I was shaking, Eliza admitted. We all were, Louisa said with a laugh. But you didn't show it. That's what matters. Lady Pemberton has been a terror for years, Diana added. No one dares contradict her because she wields social influence like a weapon. You just disarmed her completely, Charlotte smiled. Cousin Margaret won't forget this. She'll probably spend the next decade trying to undermine you at every opportunity. But you've proven you can handle her, which means you can handle anyone. Victoria spoke quietly from her corner. Alexander chose well. I can see that now. You have the kind of strength that doesn't come from privilege or training. It comes from surviving things that would have destroyed most of us. The acknowledgement from Victoria, who had more reason than anyone to resent Eliza, felt like a benediction. Thank you, Eliza said to all of them, for supporting me, for changing your minds when you could have stayed hostile, for giving me a chance when I had no right to expect one. You earned it, Catherine said firmly. Now then, we have a wedding to plan and a duchess to finish preparing. Margaret Pemberton may not accept you, but by the time we're done, everyone who matters will understand exactly why Alexander chose you. That evening, Eliza found Alexander in the library, reading by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, his expression shifting from concentration to warmth. I heard about Lady Pemberton's visit, he said, setting aside his book. Mother sent word. She said you were magnificent. I was terrified, Eliza admitted, settling into the chair beside him. But I remembered what you taught me, that other people's cruelty reflects their character, not mine. And you stood your ground. Yes, I stood my ground. She paused. Alexander, do you ever regret this? Choosing someone who brings so much complication and scandal into your life. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Never. Not once. You've brought something far more valuable than convenience or social acceptance. You've brought honesty, challenge, the courage to be vulnerable instead of safe. I was dying before you arrived, Eliza. Slowly suffocating behind walls I'd built to protect myself from pain. You broke through those walls and reminded me what it feels like to actually live. Even though it's terrifying. Especially because it's terrifying. He pulled her closer until she was sitting in his lap, her head against his shoulder. Fear means we're risking something that matters. Safety means we've given up on anything worth having. I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire and the whisper of wind against the windows. Eliza felt something settle inside her. Not certainty exactly, but a quiet confidence that they were choosing the right kind of difficult instead of the easy kind of wrong. 6 weeks, Alexander murmured. 6 weeks until you're my wife. Officially, permanently, irrevocably mine. 6 weeks until I become Duchess of Thornbury, Eliza replied. I'm still not entirely sure I know what that means. It means you'll be extraordinary at it. He kissed her temple. Mother's right. You're learning faster than anyone expected. You have instincts that can't be taught. Natural dignity, genuine empathy, the ability to read people and situations with remarkable accuracy. Those are the qualities that make a great duchess, not just knowing which fork to use at dinner. I'm still memorizing the forks, Eliza confessed with a laugh. Everyone memorizes the forks, Alexander said. The real challenge is understanding when to break the rules without causing offense. You're already better at that than most people born to this life. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Harding entered with her usual impeccable timing, late enough not to intrude, early enough to prevent anything inappropriate. Forgive me, Your Grace, Mrs. Rowan, but a messenger has arrived from London. There's been a development regarding William Rowan's claim on the Ashford property. Eliza's stomach clenched. She'd almost forgotten about her late husband's cousin and his attempt to seize her last remaining asset. What kind of development, Yum? Alexander asked, his arm tightening protectively around Eliza. Mr. Rowan has withdrawn his petition entirely, Mrs. Harding said, allowing herself a small smile. It seems he learned of Mrs. Rowan's engagement to you and decided pursuing legal action against the future Duchess of Thornbury would be unwise. The property is secured in Mrs. Rowan's name with no further claims or encumbrances. Relief flooded through Eliza so intensely she felt dizzy. It's over? The legal battle is finished? Completely finished, Mrs. Harding confirmed. You own the Ashford property outright. It's small, but it's yours. After she left, Alexander turned Eliza to face him. How does it feel, having something that's truly yours that no one can take away? Strange, Eliza admitted. Wonderful. Terrifying. I spent so long having nothing that owning something feels almost dangerous, like it could disappear at any moment. It won't disappear, Alexander said firmly. And after we're married, everything I have becomes yours as well. Property, wealth, position, all of it shared equally. You'll never be vulnerable again, Eliza. Never be at someone else's mercy. I'm at your mercy now, she pointed out quietly. If you changed your mind, I won't. But if you did, then you'd have the Ashford property, a substantial settlement from the broken engagement, and enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life, Alexander interrupted. I had my solicitors draw up agreements ensuring you're protected regardless of what happens between us. You're choosing to marry me because you want to, not because you have no other option. The thoughtfulness of it, the care he'd taken to ensure she had genuine choice, made Eliza's eyes sting with tears. Thank you, she whispered, for understanding that I needed to know I could survive without you before I could fully commit to being with you. We're both learning, he said gently. Learning to trust, to be vulnerable, to risk our hearts without guarantees. It's the hardest thing either of us has ever done. But I believe, I have to believe, it's also the most important. The last weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations, fittings, guest lists, and endless lessons from Catherine on the duties and expectations awaiting a duchess. Eliza absorbed it all with determined focus, understanding that competence would be her best defense against those who doubted her suitability. The night before the wedding, Catherine summoned Eliza to her private sitting room, a beautiful space filled with personal mementos and comfortable furniture that few outsiders ever saw. Sit, Catherine commanded, gesturing to a chair near the fire. We need to talk, honestly and privately. Eliza sat, her heart racing with familiar anxiety. Had Catherine changed her mind after all? Tomorrow you marry my son, Catherine began, her steel-gray eyes unreadable. You'll become Duchess of Thornbury and assume responsibilities that have defeated stronger women. Society will judge you harshly. Some will never accept you. Others will wait eagerly for you to fail. Do you understand what you're facing? Yes, Your Grace, Eliza said quietly. I understand. And you're choosing this anyway? Choosing a life of scrutiny and pressure and constant performance when you could take the settlement Alexander offered and live quietly somewhere peaceful? I'm choosing Alexander, Eliza corrected. The title, the responsibilities, the scrutiny, those are part of the package. But what matters is choosing to build a life with someone who makes me want to be braver than I am. Everything else is just details. Catherine studied her for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile, warm and approving. That's exactly the right answer, she said. Not the diplomatic one, not the one designed to please me, but the honest one. You're ready, Eliza, more ready than you realize, and I'm proud to welcome you as my daughter. The word daughter broke something loose in Eliza's chest. She hadn't had a mother since she was 12 years old. The idea of Catherine, formidable, exacting Catherine, claiming her as family felt simultaneously terrifying and healing. Thank you, Eliza managed through tears. That means everything to me. Catherine reached into a drawer and pulled out a velvet box. This belonged to Alexander's grandmother, the woman whose ring you wear. She was a remarkable woman who married into the Hawthorne family from relatively modest circumstances, much like yourself. She faced the same doubts, the same judgment, and she became one of the most respected duchesses in our family's history. I think she would have liked you very much. She opened the box to reveal a delicate tiara of sapphires and diamonds, designed to complement the engagement ring perfectly. Wear this tomorrow, Catherine said, as a reminder that you're not the first woman to face these challenges, and you won't be the last. But you are uniquely suited to overcome them. Trust that. Eliza accepted the tiara with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the symbolism and the trust it represented. I'll do my best to honor her legacy, she promised. I know you will, Catherine said. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow you start a new life. Face it with the same courage you've shown these past weeks, and there's nothing you can't accomplish. As Eliza left Catherine's sitting room and walked through the quiet halls of Hawthorne Manor, soon to be her home in truth, she felt the weight of what tomorrow would bring. Fear was still there. Uncertainty still lurked in the shadows. But alongside them grew something stronger, determination, hope, and the quiet confidence that came from choosing courage over safety. She'd started this journey as a desperate widow with nothing to lose. Tomorrow she would stand before society as a duchess-to-be with everything to gain. The transformation wasn't complete, might never be complete, but it was real. And for the first time in years, Eliza believed she deserved the happiness waiting just beyond tomorrow's sunrise. Eliza woke on her wedding day to Annie drawing back the curtains, revealing a sky painted in shades of pearl and rose. Winter had arrived early, dusting the grounds of Hawthorne Manor with frost that made everything look like it had been dipped in diamonds. "Morning, Your Grace," Annie said with a smile, using the title Eliza would officially claim in a few hours. "Or should I practice saying my lady until the ceremony?" "Just Eliza is fine," Eliza said, sitting up and feeling her stomach flutter with nerves. "At least for a few more hours." "The household's been up since dawn preparing," Annie reported as she brought in a breakfast tray Eliza knew she'd be too nervous to eat. "Cook's outdone herself with the wedding breakfast. The chapel's been decorated with winter roses, white ones like you requested. And His Grace has been pacing in the library since 5 this morning, according to Mrs. Harding." "He's nervous too?" "Terrified, from what I hear, though he'd never admit it." Annie's expression softened. "It's sweet, really. The fearsome Duke of Thornbury reduced to a nervous bridegroom. You've changed him, miss. Everyone sees it." Before Eliza could respond, a knock announced Catherine's arrival. The Dowager Duchess swept in wearing a gown of deep purple silk, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been genuine affection. "Leave us," she told Annie, who curtsied and departed quickly. Catherine studied Eliza with her penetrating gray gaze. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to jump off that cliff we talked about," Eliza admitted. "Good. Fear means you understand the magnitude of what you're undertaking." Catherine sat on the edge of the bed with surprising informality. "I came to give you something, not a gift exactly, more like insurance." She handed Eliza a sealed envelope. "This contains information about every major family in our social circle, their alliances, their scandals, their weaknesses. Knowledge is power in our world, Eliza. Use it wisely, and you'll never be caught unprepared." Eliza stared at the envelope, understanding the trust Catherine was offering. "This is your life's work, your protection. And now it's yours. Your family now. That means something." Catherine stood, smoothing her skirts. "One more thing. Whatever happens today or in the years to come, remember this. You earned your place here. Not through scheming or manipulation, but through courage and integrity. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." After Catherine left, Eliza opened the envelope and scanned the contents. Page after page of carefully documented information. Who owed money to whom, which marriages were unhappy, which gentlemen had gambling problems, which ladies harbored secret affairs. It was a map of society's underbelly, and it was now hers to navigate. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Madame Levesque arrived with the wedding gown, a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate lace that made Eliza look like something between a fairy tale princess and a warrior queen. The sapphire tiara Catherine had given her sparkled among carefully arranged curls. The ring Alexander had placed on her finger months ago caught the light and threw blue fire across the walls. "You look like you belong in a cathedral, not a manor chapel," Madame Levesque declared with satisfaction. "Let them try to say you are not worthy now." At precisely 2 o'clock, Eliza stood in the anteroom of the chapel, listening to the music begin inside. Through the doors, she could see the assembled guests, hundreds of them, representing the finest families in England, all there to witness and judge whether the Duke of Thornbury's shocking choice would prove inspired or disastrous. Mrs. Harding appeared to walk her down the aisle. Eliza had no father, no family, so the housekeeper had volunteered for the honor. "Ready, my dear?" Mrs. Harding asked gently. Eliza took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The doors opened, music swelled, and Eliza stepped into the chapel on Mrs. Harding's arm, her head high despite the trembling in her knees. The chapel was a marvel of candlelight and winter roses, their white petals scattered across the stone floor like snow. Guests turned to watch her approach, their faces ranging from curious to skeptical to openly hostile. Eliza recognized many of them, families who'd shunned her, women who'd whispered about her, men who'd looked through her as if she didn't exist. But at the end of the aisle, standing beside the minister with his mother and his best friend in attendance, was Alexander. He wore formal black that made him look severe and magnificent, but his eyes, those cold gray eyes she'd learned to read, held nothing but warmth and wonder as he watched her approach. For him, she could face anything. The ceremony itself passed in a haze of traditional words and solemn vows. Eliza's voice shook as she promised to honor and cherish. Alexander's hand trembled slightly as he slipped the wedding band onto her finger beside the sapphire engagement ring. When the minister pronounced them married and Alexander kissed her, it felt both terrifyingly real and impossibly surreal. She was a duchess now, wife to one of the most powerful men in England. The woman who'd sat invisible and scorned at a ball months ago had just married the man everyone said she could never deserve. The wedding breakfast was held in Hawthorne Manor's Great Hall, transformed into a winter wonderland of silver and white. Eliza sat at the head table beside Alexander, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes watching every move she made, every word she spoke, every interaction she had. "Breathe," Alexander murmured, his hand finding hers under the table. "You're doing beautifully." "I feel like I'm performing in a play where everyone knows the script except me." "Then improvise. You're better at that than you realize." The toasts began, long speeches from important men praising Alexander's achievements and carefully avoiding any mention of his unexpected choice of bride. Eliza felt each omission like a small cut, but she kept her expression serene and her smile steady. Then Catherine stood, surprising everyone by requesting permission to speak. "My son has always been stubborn," she began, her voice carrying easily through the hall. "Once he decides something, neither reason nor convention can sway him. When he told me he intended to marry Eliza Rowan, I was skeptical. I saw a widow with no family, no fortune, no training for the role of duchess. I wondered if he'd let pity or obligation cloud his judgment." Eliza's stomach clenched. Was Catherine about to publicly denounce the marriage she'd seemed to accept? "I was wrong," Catherine continued, and the hall went silent. In the weeks since Eliza arrived at Hawthorne Manor, I've watched her face challenges that would have destroyed lesser women. Conspiracy, contempt, public humiliation, she endured it all with dignity and grace. She demanded my son's genuine love, rather than accepting convenient protection. She stood up to bullies without losing her composure. She learned in weeks what most take years to master. Catherine's gaze swept the assembled guests. "Many of you doubted her suitability. Some still do. But I tell you now, Eliza Hawthorne, Duchess of Thornbury, is exactly what this family needs. She brings honesty where we've had pretense, courage where we've had calculation, and genuine warmth where we've had cold propriety. Alexander chose brilliantly, and I'm proud to call her my daughter." She raised her glass. "To the Duke and Duchess of Thornbury, may their marriage prove that sometimes the most unexpected choices become the most extraordinary blessings." The hall erupted in applause, some genuine, some merely polite, but universal. Eliza felt tears burning behind her eyes and fought to keep them from falling. Catherine had just publicly validated her in front of everyone who mattered. The Dowager Duchess's endorsement carried weight that nothing else could match. "Thank you," Eliza mouthed to Catherine, who nodded with a small smile. As the breakfast continued, guests began approaching to offer congratulations. Some were sincere, others clearly performing expected social rituals. But then Lady Diana Wentworth stood and made her way to the head table, her expression determined. "Your Grace," she said formally to Eliza, "I know we didn't start well. I was part of the group that made your first weeks here miserable. But I want you to know you've earned my respect and my loyalty. If you'll accept it, I'd be honored to serve as one of your ladies-in-waiting when you establish your own household." The offer was significant. Diana was from an excellent family, and her service would lend Eliza credibility among those still skeptical of her status. "I would be honored," Eliza said, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Diana." Louisa followed, making a similar offer. Then Charlotte, her pride clearly warring with pragmatism, but ultimately choosing to align herself with the new Duchess. Even Victoria approached, though her expression was complicated, pain mixing with determination. "I meant my promise," Victoria said quietly. I'll cause no trouble. But more than that, I want to acknowledge something publicly. She raised her voice so nearby guests could hear. When I first met you, Eliza, I saw you as an obstacle to what I wanted. I was cruel because I was jealous. But you've shown more strength and integrity than I could have managed in your position. Alexander was right to choose you. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. The public apology from a woman who'd confessed her love for Alexander silenced the nearby conversations. Victoria offering not just acceptance, but genuine respect was a powerful statement that would ripple through society's gossip networks. Thank you, Eliza said, meaning it. Your support means more than you know. As the afternoon faded into evening, the guests departed for the ball that would follow at a neighboring estate. Alexander and Eliza had perhaps an hour of privacy before they needed to appear again. They escaped to the library, their sanctuary, the place where so much of their relationship had developed. We did it, Alexander said, pulling Eliza into his arms. You're officially stuck with me now. No escape. Who says I want to escape? Eliza laughed, but there were tears in her voice. Alexander, did all that really just happen? Am I really a duchess? You're really a duchess. Really my wife. Really the woman who changed everything I thought I knew about love and trust and risk. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. How does it feel? Terrifying, wonderful, surreal. She paused. Like standing at the beginning of something enormous that I can't quite comprehend yet. That's exactly what it is, he agreed. The beginning of us. Really us. Not the arrangement we started with. Are you ready? I don't know if anyone's ever really ready for marriage, but I'm ready to try. To build something real with you, to face whatever comes together. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Harding again, with her impeccable timing. Forgive me, Your Graces, but there's been a development. Lady Pemberton has arrived at the ball venue with several influential society matrons. They're apparently planning to make a statement regarding the appropriateness of the marriage. Lord Ashworth thought you should be warned before you arrive. Eliza's stomach dropped. Of course, Lady Pemberton wouldn't let this pass without one final attack. One last attempt to undermine Eliza's position and prove her unsuitable. What kind of statement? Alexander asked, his voice going cold. I don't have details, Your Grace. Only that they intend to publicly question the match and suggest that society withhold full acceptance until the Duchess proves herself worthy over time. It's calculated to create doubt without directly insulting you. Alexander's jaw tightened with anger, but Eliza placed a hand on his arm. Let me handle this, she said quietly. Eliza, you don't have to face them alone. I'm not alone. I have your support, your mother's endorsement, and the loyalty of women like Diana and Victoria who've publicly aligned themselves with me, but this is my battle to fight. She met his eyes. Trust me? Always, he said, though worry etched lines around his mouth. But I'll be right beside you regardless. The ballroom at Lord Ashworth's estate blazed with even more magnificence than the wedding breakfast. Crystal chandeliers, gilded walls, an orchestra playing in the gallery above. Hundreds of guests mingled in their finest clothes, drinking champagne and dancing and gossiping with the particular intensity that came after a society wedding. Lady Pemberton held court near the main entrance, surrounded by 5 other formidable matrons who represented some of the oldest families in England. They watched with predatory interest as Alexander and Eliza entered, clearly waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton called out, her voice carrying across the ballroom. How lovely to see you, and looking so confident. One would almost think you believed yourself equal to the position you've claimed. Conversation stopped. Dancers paused. Everyone turned to watch the confrontation unfold. Eliza felt Alexander tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand gently, a signal to let her handle this. Lady Pemberton, Eliza said calmly, moving toward the group of matrons with her head high and the sapphire tiara catching the light. How kind of you to attend, though I notice you weren't at the ceremony itself. I trust that was merely an oversight rather than deliberate rudeness. The subtle insult, suggesting Lady Pemberton had failed in social etiquette, made several guests smile. I attended where my conscience allowed, Lady Pemberton replied coldly. The ceremony made this match legal, but legality doesn't determine appropriateness. Many of us have concerns about whether someone from your background can truly fulfill the duties required of a Duchess of Thornbury. Interesting, Eliza said. What specific concerns do you have? Perhaps I can address them directly. Lady Pemberton hadn't expected that. She exchanged glances with her companions, clearly planning to make vague insinuations rather than specific accusations. Well, one of the other matrons, Lady Hartfield, spoke up. There's the question of breeding. A duchess must manage a great estate, represent her family at court, navigate complex social and political alliances. These skills are typically acquired through lifelong education and proper family training. You had neither. That's true, Eliza agreed easily. I didn't have lifelong training, but I've spent the past 2 months learning from the best teacher available, the Dowager Duchess Catherine herself. Would you question her ability to prepare someone for the role? That put them in an awkward position. Criticizing Catherine would be a significant social misstep. Catherine is exceptional, another matron said. But 2 months of instruction cannot replace 20 years of proper upbringing. Perhaps not, Eliza said, but they can replace ignorance with knowledge, uncertainty with competence, and theory with practical understanding. I've studied the management of Hawthorne Manor, learned the complex web of family alliances, memorized the proper protocols for every social situation. I may have started from disadvantage, but I've worked harder than most to overcome it. Surely, effort and achievement matter more than the circumstances of one's birth. Effort is admirable, Lady Pemberton interjected. But it cannot change fundamental unsuitability. Your first marriage was a disaster that ended in debt and scandal. Your family has no connections worth mentioning. You bring nothing to this match except your presence, yet you've claimed one of the most prestigious positions in England. Forgive us for questioning whether that's appropriate. The attack was more direct now, and Eliza felt the old shame trying to rise up and choke her. The memory of sitting alone at that ball, hearing similar words, feeling worthless and small. But she wasn't that woman anymore. You're absolutely right, Eliza said, her voice clear and steady. I bring no family connections, no dowry, no prestigious lineage. What I bring instead is something you apparently don't value: honesty, courage, and the willingness to earn respect through action rather than expect it through birth. She turned to address the wider ballroom, not just the hostile matrons. When I met Alexander, I was drowning in my late husband's debts, facing homelessness, and watching people like Lady Pemberton treat me as less than human because I'd made the mistake of trusting the wrong man. Alexander offered me protection, and I accepted because I had no other choice. Our engagement started as an arrangement, mutual benefit, nothing more. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Admitting the truth of their arrangement was scandalous, but Eliza kept going. But somewhere between convenience and calculation, something unexpected happened. Alexander and I discovered that we could trust each other with our deepest fears, that we could build something real on a foundation of honesty rather than pretense, that love, real love, is about choosing someone every day, not about fairy tale romance or perfect compatibility. She looked directly at Lady Pemberton. You asked if I'm suitable to be Duchess of Thornbury. The answer is that I'm learning to be. Every day I'm working to earn the respect that you believe should only come from birth. I make mistakes. I don't know all the rules. I sometimes use the wrong fork or forget proper forms of address. But I'm honest about my limitations, willing to learn, and determined to serve this position with integrity rather than entitlement. And if that's not good enough for you, Eliza continued, her voice strengthening, then I suggest the problem lies not with my suitability, but with your inability to see value in anything that doesn't conform to your narrow expectations. The world is changing. People are recognizing that worth comes from character and action, not just bloodlines and bank accounts. You can either change with it or become relics of a system that values privilege over merit. The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Pemberton's face had gone pale, then red with fury. Her companions looked uncertain, clearly not expecting such a direct and eloquent response. Then, from the back of the ballroom, someone started clapping. It was Lord Hartfield, one of the most respected gentlemen in society, husband to one of the matrons who'd questioned Eliza. He walked forward, still applauding, a smile on his weathered face. Brilliantly said, Your Grace, he declared. I've spent 40 years watching young women enter society with all the right credentials and none of the backbone needed to navigate it successfully. You, madam, have more courage in your honest admission than most show in a lifetime of pretense. I, for one, welcome you as Duchess of Thornbury and believe my friend Alexander has chosen exceptionally well." Others joined the applause, slowly at first, then building into a wave of approval that swept through the ballroom. Not everyone, certainly. Lady Pemberton and her closest allies remained stony-faced, but enough people clapped that the message was clear. Eliza had won more supporters than detractors. Catherine appeared at Eliza's elbow, having materialized from somewhere in the crowd. "Well done," she murmured. "You just accomplished in 5 minutes what might have taken years. You made them see you as a person rather than a scandal." Alexander had remained silent throughout the confrontation, but now he stepped forward and addressed the assembled guests. "My wife spoke truth about the origins of our engagement," he said, his voice carrying authority. "But she left out one critical detail. Yes, our arrangement began as mutual protection, but the reason I fell in love with her, the reason I'm standing here as her husband instead of her temporary fiancé, is because she refused to settle for anything less than real. She could have accepted security without love. She rejected that. She demanded I face my fears and offer her genuine trust. No one has ever challenged me to be better than my worst instincts the way Eliza has." He turned to face her, ignoring everyone else in the room. "You asked if you're suitable to be my Duchess. The better question is whether I'm worthy of being your husband, because the answer to that is something I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn." The romantic declaration made several ladies sigh audibly. Even some of the skeptical matrons looked touched despite themselves. Lady Pemberton, realizing she'd lost this battle, drew herself up with wounded dignity. "Well, I suppose time will tell whether this match proves successful or disastrous. I maintain my reservations." "You're entitled to them," Eliza said, graciously. "But I hope that in time you'll judge me on my actions rather than your assumptions. I'd rather earn your respect than demand it." It was the perfect response, dignified without being dismissive, confident without being arrogant. Lady Pemberton had no counter to it. She turned and departed with her remaining allies, their exit watched by hundreds of fascinated eyes. As the music resumed and conversations restarted, guests began approaching Eliza with newfound respect. Some apologized for their earlier skepticism. Others simply wanted to tell her they admired her courage. A few matrons, not part of Lady Pemberton's faction, expressed interest in calling on her at Hawthorne Manor, which was society's way of offering acceptance and alliance. "You've done it," Diana whispered when she found a moment alone with Eliza. "You've actually won them over, most of them anyway." "Not all," Eliza said, watching Lady Pemberton's carriage depart through the ballroom windows. "But enough." "Enough is all anyone ever gets in this world," Diana replied with a smile. "The question is whether you can maintain it." Victoria appeared beside them, her expression complicated but genuinely warm. "That was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Admitting the truth about your arrangement, defending yourself without attacking others, turning potential scandal into triumph. You've just given every woman here a masterclass in grace under pressure." I learned from this best," Eliza said, glancing at where Catherine stood talking to a group of influential ladies, clearly consolidating support for her new daughter-in-law. "No," Victoria said quietly. "You learned from experience, from surviving things that would have broken most of us. That's not something that can be taught." As the evening progressed, Eliza danced with Alexander, accepted congratulations from an endless stream of guests, and slowly began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. Be his Duchess, navigate this complex world, build a life that honored both where she'd come from and where she was going. Near midnight, Alexander pulled her away from the crowd and led her to a quiet terrace overlooking the frost-covered gardens. "How are you really feeling?" he asked, wrapping his coat around her shoulders against the cold. Honest answer, not the diplomatic one. "Exhausted, overwhelmed, terrified that I'll wake up tomorrow and discover I'm not actually capable of maintaining this." She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "But also proud. I stood up to Lady Pemberton and didn't break. I told the truth about us and survived. That's something." "That's everything," Alexander corrected. "You were magnificent tonight, Eliza. You proved to everyone, but most importantly to yourself, that you belong here. Not because you married me, but because you have the strength and integrity to claim your place and defend it. I couldn't have done it without you, she said, without knowing you believed in me. I do believe in you, more than you believe in yourself. He tilted her face up to meet his gaze. We're going to face challenges, you and I. Society won't stop testing you. My mother will occasionally drive us both mad. We'll make mistakes and hurt each other and have to learn how to forgive. But I promise you this, I will never stop choosing you. Every day, for the rest of our lives, I choose you. And I choose you, Eliza whispered. Fears and all, mistakes and all. Whatever comes, we face it together. He kissed her then, long and deep and full of promise, while frost sparkled on the gardens below and music drifted from the ballroom behind them. 3 months later, winter had deepened its grip on Hawthorne Manor, transforming the estate into a landscape of pristine snow and crystalline ice. Eliza stood at her bedroom window, the Duchess's apartments now, not the blue suite, watching the sunrise paint the frozen world in shades of rose and gold. Your Grace, Annie's voice came from the doorway. The tenants are gathering for the quarterly assembly. His Grace is already in the hall. The quarterly assembly was one of Eliza's first major tests as Duchess, a gathering where the estate's tenant farmers and their families came to discuss concerns, receive aid if needed, and maintain the social bonds that made Hawthorne Manor function as a community rather than just a collection of properties. Catherine had warned her that the tenants would be skeptical of a new Duchess, especially one with Eliza's unconventional background. They'd loved Alexander's grandmother, tolerated Catherine herself, and would expect Eliza to prove herself worthy of the position before offering loyalty. Thank you, Annie. I'll be down shortly. Eliza dressed with care, elegant but not ostentatious, warm but appropriately formal. The sapphire tiara stayed in its case. This was not an occasion for ducal grandeur, but for accessible authority. She wore the pearls Catherine had given her, and the wedding ring that had become as familiar as her own skin. The great hall had been transformed into a meeting space, with Alexander presiding from a raised chair that wasn't quite a throne, but communicated authority nonetheless. Eliza's chair stood beside his, equal height, equal position, a statement that the Duchess was partner, not ornament. 50 families filled the hall, their faces weathered by outdoor work, their clothes clean but simple. They watched Eliza with the particular skepticism of people who'd learned not to trust promises from those born to privilege. Alexander stood as Eliza entered, a gesture of respect that made several tenants' eyebrows rise. My Duchess, he said simply, offering his hand to help her to her seat. Thank you, my Duke, Eliza replied, taking her place beside him. The assembly proceeded with traditional business, reports on harvests, discussions of needed repairs to cottages, arbitration of minor disputes. Eliza listened carefully, taking notes and asking occasional questions that demonstrated she understood the practical realities of estate management. Then came the petitions, individual requests for assistance or intervention, a widow whose cottage needed a new roof, a farmer whose son wanted to attend school in the village but couldn't afford the fees, a young couple hoping for permission to marry and receive a cottage of their own. These were Catherine's test, Eliza realized. How she responded to these petitions would determine whether the tenants accepted her or merely tolerated her presence. The widow spoke first, Mrs. Brennan, 70 years old, with hands gnarled by arthritis and eyes sharp with intelligence. Your Grace, she said, addressing Eliza directly rather than Alexander. My cottage has served 3 generations, but the roof's failing. I've no family left to help with repairs, and the work's beyond my means. I'm asking the estate for assistance, as is traditional. Eliza consulted her notes. She'd studied the estate accounts and knew exactly how much this repair would cost, and whether it fell within the budget Catherine had set aside for tenant welfare. Mrs. Brennan, Eliza said clearly, your cottage will be repaired within the fortnight. The estate will cover the cost in full. Additionally, I'm establishing a maintenance fund for elderly tenants who can no longer manage their own repairs. You won't need to petition for basic upkeep again. Surprised murmurs rippled through the hall. Alexander looked at her with approval. She'd just committed significant funds without consulting him, but the decision was sound and generous. The farmer with the scholarly son came next. Your Graces, my boy Thomas is bright. Teacher says he could maybe attend university someday if he gets proper schooling. But the village school charges fees I can't manage, not with 3 younger children to feed. Eliza had anticipated this too. Mr. Fletcher, your son's tuition will be covered by a scholarship fund I'm establishing. Any tenant child who demonstrates academic promise will receive educational support, regardless of family means. Thomas starts school next month. This time the murmurs were louder, and definitely approving. Education for common children wasn't traditional aristocratic charity. It was radical, progressive, exactly the kind of thing that separated enlightened landowners from exploitative ones. The young couple was last, barely 20 years old, clearly in love, nervously holding hands as they approached. Your Graces, we wish to marry and request a cottage on the estate, as is customary for tenant families starting out. Alexander handled this one. The Meadow Cottage has been empty since the Johnsons moved to their daughter's home. It needs work, but it's structurally sound. You may have it, rent-free for the first year while you establish yourselves. Thank you, Your Grace, the young man said, relief evident in his voice. Then, hesitantly, he addressed Eliza. Your Grace, may I ask, is it true what they say about you, that you came from nothing and married the Duke anyway? Silence fell like a stone. Several tenants looked scandalized that someone had dared ask such a personal question, but Eliza saw the genuine curiosity in the young man's eyes, and the hope that maybe the stories about the Duchess who'd risen from poverty were true, and therefore the world might not be as rigidly fixed as it seemed. It's true, Eliza said clearly. I was widowed, destitute, and drowning in debts I didn't create. I had nothing but determination and the refusal to accept that circumstances of birth determine worth. The Duke saw something in me that others missed and gave me a chance to prove myself. I'm still proving myself every day. And doing it brilliantly, Alexander added. Never doubt that merit and effort can overcome disadvantage. My Duchess is living proof. The young man smiled, a wide, genuine smile that transformed his nervous face. Then there's hope for the rest of us too. Thank you, Your Graces, for everything. As the assembly concluded and tenants filed out, several stopped to speak directly to Eliza, thanking her for the maintenance fund, praising her educational initiative, expressing surprise and approval at her accessibility and practical understanding of their lives. Old Mrs. Brennan was last, studying Eliza with those sharp eyes. You'll do well here, Your Grace, she said finally. You understand what most born to this don't, that privilege comes with responsibility, and respect must be earned, not demanded. The late Duchess, His Grace's grandmother, understood that too. You remind me of her. It was the highest compliment the old woman could offer, and Eliza felt her throat tighten with emotion. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. That means everything. After the tenants departed, Catherine appeared from where she'd been observing discreetly from the gallery above. She descended the stairs with her usual grace and approached Eliza with unmistakable pride. The maintenance fund and educational scholarships, Catherine said. Those weren't in any lesson I taught you. Where did they come from? From memory, Eliza said quietly. From knowing what it's like to need help and have no one willing to provide it. From understanding that small gestures of support can mean the difference between survival and disaster. I won't let anyone on this estate suffer from neglect if I can prevent it. And you've just ensured their absolute loyalty, Catherine observed. Well done, Eliza. You're becoming exactly the Duchess I hoped you'd be, one who uses power to serve rather than to dominate. That evening, Eliza and Alexander sat together in the library, their refuge, their sanctuary, the place where their relationship had truly begun. A fire crackled in the hearth. Snow fell softly outside the windows. Tea sat cooling on a small table between their chairs. I received a letter today, Alexander said, handing her a folded piece of paper. From Lady Pemberton. Eliza's stomach clenched, but she opened the letter and read, Your Grace, I write not to apologize. I maintain my original concerns about the unconventional nature of your marriage, but to acknowledge that you have proven yourself more capable than I anticipated. Your management of the tenant assembly has been discussed favorably among those who matter. Your charitable initiatives demonstrate understanding of responsibility that many born to privilege never achieve. You have earned a degree of respect I did not expect to offer. I remain skeptical, but I am not unjust. Continue as you have begun, and you may yet prove my initial judgment mistaken. Lady Margaret Pemberton. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even truly kind, but it was acknowledgement from one of her harshest critics that Eliza had accomplished something worth recognizing. She'll never like you, Alexander observed, but she's admitting you're competent. From her, that's practically effusive praise. I'll take it, Eliza said with a laugh. Progress comes in small increments sometimes. Alexander set aside his book and pulled her from her chair into his lap. A familiar comfort they'd developed, this physical closeness that still felt miraculous months into their marriage. Do you remember the night I proposed? He asked. The real proposal, in the library after you rejected me at the ball? I remember being terrified, Eliza admitted. Terrified of wanting something so much that losing it would destroy me. Are you still terrified? She considered the question honestly. Sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night and remember everything I could lose, when I make mistakes managing the household and worry I'm not good enough, when I see the way some people still look at me and know they're waiting for me to fail. And what do you do with that fear? I choose courage anyway, Eliza said. Every day, I choose to be brave enough to risk my heart, to claim my place, to believe I deserve this happiness. Fear doesn't disappear just because we acknowledge it, but it doesn't have to control us either. No, Alexander agreed, kissing her temple. It doesn't. We control it, together. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire and the falling snow, existing in the peaceful certainty of their partnership. Alexander, Eliza said eventually. Thank you. For seeing me when everyone else looked through me, for offering protection when I had nothing, for having the courage to risk loving me even though you were terrified, for becoming the man who meets me as an equal instead of as a savior. Thank you, he replied, for demanding I be better than my fears, for refusing to settle for security without love, for teaching me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bravest choice we can make. You saved me, Eliza, just as much as I saved you. Maybe more. Then we saved each other, she said, and now we build something neither of us could have created alone. Exactly. He tightened his arms around her. Together, always together. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Hawthorne Manor in pristine white. Inside, warmth and light and love transformed what had once been a battlefield into a home. The widow no one wanted had become the duchess everyone respected, not through manipulation or luck, but through courage, integrity, and the revolutionary choice to demand genuine love in a world that valued convenience over truth. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more challenges, more skeptics, more moments when Eliza questioned whether she truly belonged in this world she'd fought so hard to claim. But she would face them all with Alexander beside her, Catherine's support behind her, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing she'd earned her place through the hardest work imaginable, the work of becoming herself. Years later, when people told the story of the Duke of Thornbury and his remarkable Duchess, they would remember not just the scandal of their unconventional beginning, but the triumph of their ending. Two damaged people who chose courage over safety, honesty over pretense, and love over everything else. They would remember the widow who sat invisible at a ball and the duke who saw her when no one else did. They would remember the woman who demanded real love instead of accepting comfortable protection, and the man who found the strength to offer it. But most of all, they would remember that sometimes the most extraordinary destiny begins with a single, terrifying choice. The choice to believe you deserve more than survival and to fight for it with everything you possess. Eliza had made that choice in a glittering ballroom months ago when a feared duke offered her an impossible proposal and she said yes with nothing left to lose. Now, sitting in his arms in the library of their shared home, she understood that she'd actually had everything to gain. Not security, not wealth, not even the title she now carried, but something infinitely more valuable, the chance to become who she was always meant to be, beside someone who loved her not despite her scars, but because of the strength they represented. That was the real transformation. Not widow to duchess, poverty to privilege, invisible to celebrated, but fearful to courageous, alone to partnered, surviving to thriving. The woman who'd once sat in shadows now stood in light, and she'd earned every ray of it through her own magnificent, terrifying, extraordinary courage.